Good afternoon. The Committee on Environment, Revenue, Taxation, Procurement is now called to order. It is now 1:00 p.m., Monday, September 23, 2019. Notice of this afternoon's public hearing was provided to senators, stakeholders, and the local media on September 16th, meeting the 5-day notice, and September 19th, meeting the 48-hour notice, thus meeting the requirements for open government law. I would like to acknowledge my colleague who has joined me today, Senator Clint Rigel. Thank you. The purpose of today's hearing is to hear testimony regarding the executive appointment of Mr. Peter Valdez to serve as a member as a banking industry representative of the Guam Banking and Insurance Board. Second is to hear the testimony for the executive appointment of Mr. Roland Bisco to serve as a member, insurance industry representative of the Guam Banking and Insurance Board, and to hear and receive testimony on Bill number 188-35 COR, sponsored by Senator Clint Rigel. It's an act to repeal Section 12128, Chapter 12, Title 12, Guam Code Annotated, relative to back billing. The committee will continue to receive written testimony until 4 p.m. on Monday, September 30th. Please address testimony to Senator Sabina Perez, Chairperson of the Committee on Environment, Revenue, Taxation, Procurement, or it can be dropped off at the mailboxes here at the Guam Legislature Building or emailed to office@senatorperez.org. So to begin our agenda, the first item is to receive testimony on the executive appointment of Mr. Peter Valdez to serve as a member as a banking industry representative of the Guam Banking and Insurance Board. So I would like to call up the nominee, Mr. Valdez, and if there's anybody here who would like to also present testimony. Good afternoon, Mr. Valdez. I'm sorry, is the button pressed by any chance? Yeah, there you go.
Is that it?
That's good.
All right, thank you. I'm not quite sure if Chairwoman Shimizu is here, but Ranking Member Perez and members of the committee, thank you for taking time to hear my nomination as member of Guam Banking and Insurance Board by authority of executive appointment. While I'm not roundly versed in matters surrounding insurance, most of my experience has been in banking. I am humbled by the opportunity to you gave me to serve as a member to share my 24 years in banking, to fill the role of member of the Banking and Insurance Commission. I'm deeply honored the governor has nominated me to serve in that capacity. My role as a member will extend to meeting and listening closely to community bankers, consumers, small business owners, and community leaders. My current role in the bank already affords me to visit with business leaders across the island to discuss things such as the economy, what's going on in our business community. I hope these unique perspectives are represented in the Office of Banking and Insurance, deliberations and decision-making on regulatory matters mandated by 11 GCA 103. During my time at the board, I hope to draw my experience as a community banker and experiences with various regulators to ensure that our work is guided by a deep understanding of the practices and realities confronting bankers and the communities they serve across the island. The work has already been done by federal regulators for regulated banks after the global financial crisis to address the weaknesses in the U.S. financial system, which runs across what we do here on the island, and ensure its future resilience was essential. However, at my time working for local banks, I saw firsthand how regulatory change created in the aftermath of the crisis impacted community banks. Small, solid institutions like our local banks are essential to many of our island citizens and communities. As regulators, we need to ensure we are not imposing unnecessary burdens on our community banks. That is why one of my priorities will be to tailor our supervision and regulation to size, complexity, capacity, and risks posed by an institution. To further this effort, I hope to form working groups of experts across the banking industry to institute a comprehensive review of our supervisory work, broadening our participants to actively involve credit unions and finance companies. I'm committed to treating every consumer and institution fairly and respectfully and fostering open communication. This work group will follow the same principles by looking for ways to optimize our supervision and regulation to ensure it adopts realities of an evolving industry and changing our consumer expectations while maintaining safety and soundness of our banking system. Let me close by saying a few words about banking and insurance mandate. As a community banker, it's my job to support local businesses and consumers. I will draw upon this experience when thinking about regulatory policy because it has given me a personal and practical understanding of the Commission's goals of protecting the consumer, above all, as well as the broader financial system and the economy. If confirmed, I will serve to provide the important work and be committed to accountability, transparency, and clear communication in all of my responsibilities at the Commission. Thank you for the honor of this hearing, and I look forward to answering the Commission's questions.
Thank you, Mr. Valdez. We did receive a follow-up, an update to your resume, because the current one that you have, actually there was a gap between 2000 and, sorry, there was a slight gap between December 2013, I believe, no, 2016. January 2016, and there was a gap between there and October 2017. So just for the record, we did receive your updated resume that accounts for the gap. So, so from 2016, January 2016, the addition was PenFed Credit Union, and then in 2000, from May 2016 to September 2017 was Personal Finance Center, and then October 2017 to May 2019 was Community First Credit Union, and then from June of this year, and current is ANZ. So in looking at your history resume, you've had quite a wide range of experience from the banking and then credit unions to finance centers. Can you just give a little context about the differences between those and as far as regulation is concerned?
Institutionally, the local banks are regulated by federal regulating bodies. Some of the participating banks who are organized as state chartered banks are overseen by the FDIC, and some of the larger banks, national banks, are overseen by the OCC and the FDIC combined. But we all live under the same umbrella through the CFPB when it comes to consumer protections. And there's small clusters of, and not to leave out the credit unions who are also overseen by NCUA. So there's a huge federal regulatory umbrella that oversees a lot of the regulatory compliance requirements that the local financial institutions on island have to go through.
Okay, and as far as finance, personal finance centers?
Finance companies are a bit unique in that they're locally chartered and locally licensed to do business here, and they abide by local mandates, usury requirements set by local law, overseen by the Banking and Insurance Commission. Yeah. Yeah, so the oversight falls within the commission. Yeah.
So you'd mentioned earlier that you're looking to, in your testimony, if you can restate that regarding what your priorities are.
So sizing up the banks and providing a little bit more transparency in what we're already doing and enhancing a lot of the financial reporting requirements by the banks is essential in maintaining that transparency. So right now we provide financial statements on an annual basis when I say we, I'm talking about the banks, to Banking Insurance Commission. And an added layer to that will be really how these banks are sized up against each other and the type of oversight that comes with the different sizes. So, you know, a bank that's, say, a medium-sized bank from a regulatory standpoint versus a larger bank goes through different levels of regulatory scrutiny, and putting that into what we do as a commission will bring in a lot of valuable discussions. Yeah.
So what would that bring? What advantage would that bring?
First of all, it reduces any overlap that might already been that's mandated by the current commission, and by providing that transparency with what's already being done on the compliance side, we may focus on other things more closely to areas that perhaps there may be gaps, and I can't speak of those gaps because I'm not quite sure where those gaps are, but there may be areas where there's not as much oversight because they're not under the federal umbrella, for instance. Yeah.
Would that increase consumer protections, or is there any connection?
That's the goal, and that's ultimately the goal, is to ensure that there's no consumer harm that's put out in the practices by the financial institutions. Yeah.
This also cover credit unions, finance centers, personal finance centers?
It'll, to some degree, it will be, but you know, just like the banks, the credit unions have direct oversight through NCUA, the National Credit Union, and so they go through their regular regulatory audits. Yeah.
Okay. So I just have a question regarding your history. So I noticed you had long stints with First Hawaiian Bank,
Mm-hmm.
and then after that there was a series of different employers.
Right.
Can you speak to that as far
Sure.
as
Sure.
the differences?
First Hawaiian Bank was probably the institution that I've worked with for the longest, and gained most of my experience in lending, particularly in the retail lending space, and extending that into other areas of the financial industry came with finding new challenges. So part of that was to extend what I've learned throughout the years I've been with First Hawaiian Bank with smaller institutions, and that was in part with my decision to move into working with PenFed at the time. And what PenFed was doing was a little bit unique, out of the box thinking with their business model by having a branch outside of the base. So the position I picked up at PenFed at the time was to run and operate their off-base branch. Yeah. And that extended into working with institutions like Personal Finance and Community First.
Okay. Do you see any, do you have any conflict of interest?
Conflict of interest in serving for the board? No, not directly. And if there's any business that's related to what I do now within my capacity as head of commercial with ANZ, The law requires me to abstain from any participation from what I do currently and from what I've done in the past 12 months. Yeah. So if there's any potential conflict, I would step away from any of those dealings. Yeah. And in addition to that, I just want to state that as a banker for a federally regulated bank, every year we have to disclose any active involvement with any associations that we have or I have as an employee of the bank. Yeah. So there's that full transparency.
Okay. All right. And are you able to determine, in other cases, if there is a conflict of interest, whether, not including your service at A&Z Bank, how are you able to determine if there's other potential conflicts of interest?
Conversation with other commission members would be a first step, and explaining whether or not by participating in such a venue that may pose a threat of a conflict, just the perception of a conflict, I would want myself to be outside of that. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So in your documents, you own a business. It's Global. What is the name of the company?
Global Capital Partners.
Yeah, Global Capital Partners.
It's been dormant for a couple of years now.
Can you explain what the?
It was mostly consulting for financial advisory, estate planning, of the such, at a time when, I had some clients who were seeking, outside of what I do at the bank, advice on how to plan for their estate, and what types of steps to take, and what venues to approach in financial and estate planning. Yeah, so it was just purely consultative. Yeah.
And the clients could be anywhere from an individual to
a business.
Businesses.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And they're generally local businesses?
Yes, yeah. They're within market. Yeah, so locally.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, and there hasn't been any activity in that capacity, I would say, in the last 5 years.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Valdez. I would like to acknowledge my colleague, Senator Regine Biscoli, who has joined me here today as well. Thank you. So I would like to open the floor to my colleagues for any questions. Senator Rigel? Senator Biscoli?
Hafide, Mr. Valdez, and I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank the Governor and Lieutenant Governor for nominating you to this position. I think that it's important that we get this board stood up and up and running. And I was really grateful to hear that transparency and maybe taking a look at some of the reporting requirements is something that you're hoping to do if confirmed into this position. The chair was good enough to bring up a question about conflicts of interest, and you had mentioned that you would abstain from participation if any potential conflicts of interest arise. And can you just confirm that?
Absolutely, yep.
Also, some of the issues that we've encountered with this board and many other boards and past boards and commissions is just the ability to make quorum. And it's my understanding that, you're busy in your professional life. You might have some other organizations that you're tied to include Guahan Napu and others. And so I just wanted to get a verbal response from you to inform the committee about being able to make it to these meetings and just being prepared in advance of the meetings to make sure that we take the full opportunity for your participation.
Sure. I mean, as I mentioned earlier to Ranking Member Perez when we had our preliminary interview, if my previous involvement with past government boards is any indication, while I served at the Guam Housing, I didn't miss a single meeting. So I make it a priority to ensure that I engage. And if there's any extenuating circumstances, I believe that's the only time I would be pulled away from that responsibility.
All right, very good, Mr. Valdez. And I just want to thank you again for accepting the governor's nomination and for serving the people of Guam, hopefully in this position. And we look forward to confirming you and getting on with it. So again, we thank you so much for stepping up to the plate.
Yeah, thank
Si
you.
Diyos Maasi. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Lee. So thank you, Mr. Valdez, for accepting the nomination, and we will look forward to deliberating on your nomination.
Great.
So
Thank you.
thank you very much. Okay, the second item on the agenda is to hear testimony regarding the executive appointment of Mr. Roland Bisco to serve as a member as an insurance industry representative of the Guam Banking and Insurance Board. I'd like to call up those that have come to testify, as well as the nominee himself, if he can come up to the table. We did receive written testimony from various members of the public. Carlos Camacho, Junha, Joseph Rivera, Keith Abe, Leonor Estella, and Oscar Miyashita. Thank you. And also Simon Sanchez II as well. Okay, so it looks like we have those that have signed up here to provide testimony. Simon Sanchez, Art Ilagan. And if there's anybody else we've missed, you're welcome to come up to the table. So we would like to begin with the nominee himself, Mr. Roland Bisco.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Senator Sabina, Perez, members of the committee. My name is Roland Bisco, and I come before you grateful for your time, thankful to Governor Lou Leon Guerrero and Lieutenant Governor Joshua Tenorio for their confidence in nominating me to serve on the Insurance and Banking Board with the Department of Revenue and Taxation. On a personal note, I'm fortunate to have been Catholically educated throughout, both by Jesuits and Franciscans. The Jesuits have instilled diligence in education, and the Franciscans, of course, emphasize that only by serving one another, purpose is attained. And although both disciplines have helped me search for strength and balance in my life, the struggle remains. I am, however, equally blessed with the support of 6 siblings, 4 wonderful adult children, the eldest of who serves in this committee, 3 son-in-laws, 5 grandchildren, and an active mom of 87 who still manages to keep me in check. So I'm fortunate. I wanted to acknowledge the presence of my brothers Randy and Glenn who are here. I'm also pleased to share that this is my 43rd year in the insurance industry. I'm fortunate to have served in all segments and in both sides, including sales, management, compliance, state conservation, retirement planning, employee benefit consulting, and as an industry instructor. I remember when I was a sophomore at FD, my father, who was also in the industry at the time representing Calva's Insurance, hired me to assist him with filing, checking the accuracy of proposal quotes, picking up paperwork and sealed medical records to submit as underwriting for underwriting purposes. And I thought to myself, I don't know if I would ever do this kind of work, because I didn't like to shuffle paper. 3 to 4 years later, in my junior year in college, I responded to a work-study ad to assist a junior estate planner at a law firm that was close to campus. It was so intriguing and meaningful, and 3 months later, I took and I passed the insurance state exams and literally never looked back. The paperwork part, thankful to automation, is now bearable. But the people part, I love the most. I've served in various capacities as a member in the Guam Association of Life Underwriters, which is now referred to as the Insurance Association of Guam. I've served as a member of the Insurance Advisory Board for 3 years under the ADA and Calwa administrations, as an instructor for the Life Underwriter Training Council, and I have been blessed to represent Guam as a qualifying member in the $1 Million Roundtable for 11 consecutive years, and the Court of the Table for 2 years. This organization has inspired and elevated insurance professionals to gain a deeper understanding and appreciation for what this product does economically for mankind in solving its multi-generational issues, in preserving legacy, and knowing that money alone cannot be the solution to its problems, but the use of it for the greater good. I've served in the real estate industries concurrently for about 26 years, and the mortgage industry for about 5. I've held licenses with the National Association of Securities Dealers in my early years, and I currently provide some risk management work for professionals while completing certification as a risk management analyst. Having served on the board before, I took the liberty to review several of the last board minutes online, and I found really some similar challenges, but a better process in regulatory areas such as licensing, implementing CE requirements online, and hopefully soon, pre-licensing requirements as well. Continuing education is an issue I am passionate about and which is currently under review with your office, Madam Chair. CE is important not for compliance alone, but hopefully to weed out those who may not have the public's best interests at heart. I believe the current CE requirements could be improved, and if confirmed, I hope the board and ultimately the insurance commissioner would consider implementing a proactive program to enhance agent confidence and skills so that they may provide a simpler approach for the insuring community to understand their various insurance policies beyond its face value. Other areas needing attention are how certain required forms and the renewal of licenses should be filed online, revisiting fees that should be justifiably increased to bring better efficiency to the ISBRE division. Certification of authority fees need examination, I think, making sure that Guam is in line with the national scale. The license fees for agents in all lines, including securities brokers, are seriously comparably low. Statutes regarding penalties for companies operating without valid licenses is 97% below comparable. Some banking fees may also be required for review, and although not part of this board, but equally important are the real estate appraisal and adjuster fees. Proposing statute to better regulate our foreign exchanges is also an important matter, and to acknowledge that a critical need for actuarial services within the ISBRE to examine rate evaluations, rate reviews, possibly reinsurance options. These can be easily supported, if we examined it closely. So yes, the issues of the board today really is no different, except that we're moving at a faster pace for a community that demands more service from government. And since the industries being served by the ISBRE deals with protecting community and their assets in many ways, then the purposes for which the board serves should stay focused to its mission, but not limited to providing certain reality checks for the good of all. I thankfully accept this nomination to the board. confident that I can contribute to it and to the department. However, let me just say that should a conflict of interest arise in any situation, I have no issues in recusing myself in the situation. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee, for your time in hearing my testimony and of those who are here on my behalf. And lastly, I ask that each of you humbly for your favorable confirmation and support to serve again as a member of the Insurance and Banking Board. Si Tuas Masi.
Thank you, Mr. Bisco.
Thank you.
So I appreciate if you can stay after other testimonies given, and we can ask questions a little later. Yeah, thank you. So next on the list is Mr. Simon Sanchez.
Buenas, Madam Chairman, Senator Rangel, and Senator Bisco-Lee. I'm here to testify in support of the nomination of Roland Bisco as a member and insurance industry representative on the Guam Banking and Insurance Board, the GBIB. Hate to admit it, but I've known Roland for almost 50 years, having attended Father Duenas with him while purchasing my still current life insurance from him and observing his career over the decades. Roland will bring his vast experience to the table in assuring the GBIB helps maintain the proper regulatory oversight over our island's insurance and banking industries. There's not an insurance product with which Roland would be unfamiliar. There's not an insurance company's governance and pricing structure that would be unfamiliar to Roland. He has all the background necessary to balance the interests of insurance providers and customers. He served on the predecessor to the current GBIB in the 80s. He was asked to serve by Republican governors back then, and now is being asked to serve by a Democratic MAGA Haga. He has proven the ability to work well with leaders from all walks of life, insurers, and customers. On a personal level, I've come to know and trust Roland over the many, many years. He's a good family man, as you can see in his children. Just don't ask me about the trip to Japan during our senior year in 1974. Our people will be greatly served if you allow and confirm Mr. Roland Bisco to serve as a member and insurance industry representative on the Guam Banking and Insurance Board. Sinceramente, Simon Sanchez. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. Mr. Logan?
Good afternoon, Senator Rangel, Senator Perez, Senator Lee. My name is Artemio Ilagan. I was the former Banking and Insurance Commissioner. I was also the former Director of Rev and Tax. I am here in support of Mr. Roland Bisco as a nominee for the Banking and Insurance Board. I know Roland personally since our younger days. His father and my father were good friends. They came from, I believe, the same province. They arrived as immigrants in the late 40s and 50s. They married local ladies, and they had very, very respectful children. We were brought up with the same educational discipline. We were brought up by Mercy nuns, Capuchin priests, and then we graduated from Jesuit universities. Roland is also a second cousin to my wife through his mother. His mother and my father-in-law are first cousins. And I'm not here just supporting Roland because I know him. Look at his resume. I mean, he's got so many things behind him. He was one of my first life insurance agent that sold me the first policy I ever had, and I was in my younger days. I still have a policy with the family. But Roland, since 1976, has accumulated a vast experience in lending and insurance. He was a general agent of insurance company. He was a sales manager and marketing director. He was a loan consultant, a realtor, a risk management consultant, all involving insurance and banking. Roland has followed in his father's footsteps. Roland's knowledge and experience will be an asset in regulating and protecting the consumers in both insurance and banking. Mr. Rowland mentioned earlier about CEs. I mean, we've been pushing CEs. It was before Senator San Augustine. So the thing was we were trying to push this back in maybe 3 or 4 years ago. But this is through the NAIC, the National Insurance Commissioners Association, which has a program that allows each state and territories to be a part of with the National Insurance Producers Registry. With this program, if we get the required CEs from in agents that wants to be insurance agents, as Roland has mentioned, we would be a part of the program that we would use their programs to renew licenses. And with that, they don't have to line up. The only thing they have to do is clear business license and taxes. But everything else they would take care of. The collection of the cash would be done by them through their offices. And what would happen was they would issue the license themselves and then refund the cash that the insurance agents paid to the government of Guam. This would also give the benefit of Guam residents to see who the world or nationwide insurance agents out there who's got bad reputations. We don't have that access now because we're not part of that. So what that would do is put our agents in this national listing, and people from all over the United States and the territories would look at these agents, and when they come and visit a prospective consumer, they can go in there and see if this guy is a good person or can cheat you, and that's the purpose of this insurance and banking and the regulatory. It's to protect the consumers. So I believe that Roland's background, his education, the way he was brought up, would be an asset to the insurance and banking. And I urge the legislature to confirm his nomination. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Logan. So I just have just a couple questions. I did have a chance to speak with you prior to this. So I'm looking at your priorities, the areas that you want to improve. It seems like the time is it's much needed. It's a long time coming as far as these changes, reforms that you want to address, and I think that these are a good list right here. I'm just thinking, you recently worked in Las Vegas, Nevada, and I'm just wondering if your perspective was created, or what did you bring from your work in the States? What perspective do you bring from that to Guam, and what areas do you think may not necessarily apply to the insurance industry here?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Relative to that, the insurance industry has been probably one of the pillar industries of the world. Its governance, it doesn't matter where you're at, will be the same because you're dealing with interests of the insuring public. But in the States, I had a chance to work with compliance heavily to see that efficiency and effectiveness is definitely important. And of course, the biggest thing is there's always a reality check when it comes to what is being spent and what is being dished out. What agents can expect to receive and what the government can expect to give out. And so with that little bit of experience, that is kind of what I plan to bring to the table if confirmed.
You've also had experience in other areas such as mortgage, you mentioned, as well as real estate. What does that bring as far as perspectives to working on this banking commission board? Or do you?
Well, I know that the board has representatives in those industries. So it'll give me an opportunity to share a very, very minimal experience that I've had in the mortgage and banking area. And the regulation is different there than it is in banking. So whatever I was able to obtain it in those 5 years, I'm able to impart for the protection of the community.
Okay, so also just a couple more questions. As far as conflict of interest, do you have any conflict of interest?
No, and as I indicated earlier, there was a situation where it proposes a conflict of interest should arise. I would happily recuse myself from that. I don't have any issues. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I'd like to open the floor to my colleagues. Senator Biscoli? Or,
Sidus Masi, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I just at this time like to state for the record, while I wholeheartedly support this very handsome nominee and have every confidence in his abilities to serve the island of Guam very well, I will not be participating in the consideration of his appointment. I will not be voting in committee or on the floor, as this appointee happens to be my father. So, hi, Dad. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Senator Biscoli. Senator Rigel? No questions. So thank you, Mr. Bisco, for accepting the executive appointment. I think you have a breadth and depth of experience in the insurance industry and diverse perspectives, not just from the insurance industry, but other areas. And the fact that you have priorities and already an action list, I think that's going to be very helpful as a board member. So thank you so much for accepting the nomination.
Sidus Masi.
Thank you very much. Okay, so for the third item on the agenda is to hear testimony regarding Bill number 188-35 COR, sponsored by Senator Clinton E. Rigel. It's an act to repeal Section 12128, Chapter 12, Title 12, Guam Code annotated relative to back billing. At this time, I would like to give the floor to my colleague, the sponsor, to provide an introduction on this bill. Senator Rigel.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Hafa day, everyone. Thank you for attending today's public hearing. Bill 188 seeks to eliminate a practice that has plagued many GPA and GWA customers, the practice of back billing. I believe this practice is flawed, full of inconsistencies, and unfair. Most customers aren't given much of a reason for their bill. Customers are told just to accept the bill and pay the bill, or face disconnection. I've heard story after story of how people get hit with massive back bills that they simply can't afford. They have no idea why they were billed so much when they know that their average monthly usage doesn't amount to the back bill that they've received. They get told that perhaps they have a leak, or maybe they used more water than they realized, or more power than they realized. When faced with disconnection, the average person often just gives in and pays whatever amount they're told to pay. This often means they have to forego paying some other bill. It's either that or have your power or your water cut off. There is no other utility company to go to. We can't take our business elsewhere. We're trapped. We have no choice, no recourse, no way to dispute the bill we've been given. We're told to pay or else. There's no other business I'm aware of where you can be back billed based upon a guess, not actual fact, but an estimate based on what they think or what they tell you they believe you've consumed. This is all at no fault to the customer. Whatever happened to the old adage of the customer is always right? With the utilities, it seems like the customer is always wrong. The customer doesn't know any better, and the utilities have this attitude of, we, the utilities, know better. The utilities know how much you've consumed, even though they don't. The whole excuse for back billing is that the meter failed. Their meter failed. So because they don't know what to charge you, because their meter failed, they will make up an amount based on their estimate, not on actual usage. And then they bill you. and then you must pay, or else. They've had years to solve their meter problem, and yet customers are still being back-billed regularly. These are not small isolated incidents. This is system-wide. This is a systemic problem, and it needs to be fixed. And when we ask customer service representatives how they can do this to us, how they can bill us a seemingly arbitrary number, we're told it's the law. The law allows us to back bill for up to 4 months. So if it's the law that allows this problem to persist, then I say it's time to change the law. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rangel. I'd like to, at this time, recognize Senator Therese Chalahi, who has joined us here at this time. Thank you. So we would like to call up those that have signed up to testify. We've asked, members asked to testify first, Oscar Calvo. We also have Ken Leon Guerrero. We have Miguel Berdalio, John Beneventi, and there's a name I don't recognize, but if you did sign up, if you can come up to the table. And then there's Ken San-Augustine. Is there anybody else that would like to testify? Oh, okay, and Simon Sanchez. Is he outside? Okay. All right, so if we can begin with Oscar Calvo. So before you testify, I appreciate if you state your name for the record.
Good afternoon, Senators. My name is Oscar Calvo. I'm here in the Bill 188. I just want to make this clear that my situation today is regards on the water, that I feel that the disparity that was done to me. And it goes back in 2014. I had 3 times I have changed my meter, by the way, within this period of time. In 2014, when Craddock was director at the time, that's when the faulty meter started to go through and all that stuff. So they put a meter back somewhere around in the 15th, the following year. So then, okay, then my other problem started to, arise again. I was getting water bill, and I'm saying, wow, I must have used less water this month. So what I did was confronted, the Guam Water Works, and he says, well, just continue to pay, the average water bill, which was like, I think, $20-30 a month, something like that. So, okay, I did. So they made a change on that, and then I think in 2018, they said they went out there to, change the meter and everything, but they claimed that they couldn't find the meter because there's a construction going on, which is true. There is a construction going because they're laying, I live at Cross Island Road, they're laying these for the sewage line and so forth. But where the meter is, I'm the only meter there at the corner, and I measured it from where the construction site is about good 15 feet, 15 and a half feet to be exact. So even if they dig on the side, it's not. So they're saying, well, the meter was buried. For so many years, the telephone pedestal and the water meters was right next to it and everything. So when I went to dispute to this, they said, well, the guy went out there, they said they couldn't find the meter. Okay, then I found out later, oh, we don't need, because we can find your meter because it's electronic on the meter. We can read it even if it's underground. So for 15 months, I confronted them. I told them, look, my water meter, something is wrong with it. They say, well, you might have a leak and all that, which I did repair that. Cost me almost $2,000 at the Barrett company to come out there and redo all my water line just to make sure and everything. But so I get this bill. The first they told me, they said, well, they were originally going to charge me like almost $1,000. I said, heck, I ain't going to pay this. They said, well, but the law now, we can only charge you 4 months, like what you said, Senator. But my reasons for that is, for 15 months, I've been door knocking, telling you guys that I have a problem with my meter. I have a problem. Took 15 months for them to change it, and their ration. And the reason for that is because they didn't have, the equipment or whatever the issues were, and I'm not going to dispute that. And maybe did I use those water on those times, but they said I still, and they said, well, so how did you derive with this? They said, well, we estimated a water bill. When Craddock was back then in 2014, I want to see the meter that you guys took out of my place. And I want to make sure, is it the right meter number and what was the last registered on that meter, okay? And their reasons were, and this is, and I don't blame the workers, the people that work there, because that's what so much, I don't, and this is what we're finding. So I said, look, I'm not going to pay this water bill. And I've been disputing this water bill, So it came down to from, I don't know, I think now to about $300-400 now, okay? But still the fact remains is I still paid that for 15 months. I was paying that water bill. Just continue to pay on, Mr. Calvo, don't worry about it, So they're saying, well, we had to do a massive change, around the island. That's fine, but confront me. And I go back and forth to the mainland because I have health issues that I go through. Periodically, I go back. So my water bill has been, I said, bill me from starting the day you put my meter, okay? Don't back bill me for that matter. My bill should really start, and so I told him, I said, look, I'm just going to dispute this bill for now until we resolve this problem, because it's not like I didn't confront them. For 15 months, I've been knocking doors and telling them no, that the water, my meter, 3 times, they finally put a new meter there, that's 3 times, okay? So it's not like I was, using it as an scapegoat, because when I first looked at my water bill, I said, wow, how come that low? Maybe because I was off island, but my son was still there. So there's got to be some sort of water usage that you use. But they say that I had to pay it because that's the law. Now, maybe we need to, like what you said, maybe we need to amend that law, whatever, and that's, you senators would be the one to partake that. But I think I'm just here to confront about my water bill, because to me, I was never, well, they say that they sent me a letter and all this, and maybe they did, okay? I'm not disputing all of that. But when they told me that they couldn't read my meter because they couldn't find the meter, then they told me, we can read your meter because it's it's a chronicle which can be buried. And they say, well, there was a construction going, which is true. When they were laying, but from the construction site is as far as to that wall behind you. So even if they excavate the dirt and put it on the side, it's no way. And on top of that, at the time, we even put a pipe to make sure that it's visible. And here's the power, here's the telephone pedestal, the water, and I'm the only one there. So for so many years, you've been reading my water meter all these years, and then one day you say, I can't find it, but by the way, we can relocate your meter because it's electronic. I even, as far as told him, I said, you know what? I don't even know if that meter is really changed because it's still buried there on the box. So, and that's the reason why I'm just, testifying on that Bill 180. I don't think so. It's fair, and I don't know, I can't speak for the others, but my position on there is, like I said, for 15 months, I've been letting them know, hey, I got a problem, okay? Why did it take 15 months to solve that problem and say, okay, we're going to hit you this bill because this is what the law says, okay? How did you come out? How did you derive on that meter? How do I know that was the actual reading? Well, I want to see that meter because when Craddock was there, the day they took out that, I was there, they pulled it out, they put the new one. I even went down to the Guam Water Works where they tested and everything. Okay? Want to make sure, and it had some faulty, okay? So, and they're telling me, well, because it was a massive change. And, we couldn't contact, that's that's your jurisdiction, not mine. So I'm just letting you know. So I'm just in support of that Bill 188 on my water, what other issues that I have, because I think, like you said, maybe we need to change the law. And I'm not, disputing on that. And maybe I did use all those waters, whatever the 15 months. Of course I would have probably used it. But that's the reality behind it. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Calvo. So just to clarify, the first time there was a problem was back in what year?
It was 2000. It started out in 14.
2014.
Okay, when Craddock was the director at the time. Then they didn't resolve that problem because that's when the faulty meter started to come out. So then they kind of really did a massive change back then, but they didn't repair that until the 15, somewhere around the 15, you know. So that one went well, and then they, in 2017, and then on the 18th again, okay? So for 15 months, come on. I can understand maybe 3 or 4 months, but and it's been locked in at the Guam Water Works at their office. I said, make sure you guys, I'm telling you now, just go ahead and pay, you know, what you're paying what's the average bill? I think 25 or 30 bucks, which I did. We'll, you know, and once we figured the problem, but 15 months, and then you get slapped with almost $1,000 bill. But by the way, we're not gonna charge you the 1,000. We're just gonna charge you 4 months because of the law, okay? I'm not disputing that. But you had 15 months, okay? Why did it take 15 months and then not knowing me, letting me know that they did change the meter? And it really was kind of boggling in my mind is, okay, they couldn't do the test because they couldn't find the meter. Glenn, where I live, there's only one meter there, only one. It's not like maybe 3 or 4. And maybe they might be confused. The reason was there was a construction, yes. But I measured, in fact, before I came, like I said, I measured it again from there, and I said, 15.5 speed. I said, there's no way, even if you're doing a site excavation. So, you know, so I said, but they're claiming, they said, well, you know, we don't need because we can find where you're, and so forth. But you know what? Maybe whatever the reading was, and they said, how did you guys come out? And said, well, we did an estimation from your past. That was the past. I want to know what's the present. So bill me from that day you install it, but don't give me a 4-month back bill. I think, and that's a fair play. So, you know, I'm just letting you guys know.
Okay.
And I hope you
Thank
guys don't hate me.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Calvo. Thank you.
I love you guys anyway.
Thank you. Mr. Leon Guerrero?
I gotta go. Thank you. I have a doctor's meeting appointment. Take care, guys.
My name is Ken Leon Guerrero. I'm a resident of Santa Rita, and I'm one of the many victims of the current back billing procedure. GWA and GPA selected meters that fail almost as often as they work, and when the equipment fails, utilities should pay the price of those mistakes, not the ratepayers. After all, if they have enough money to give top management excessive raises and bonuses, they have enough money to pay for the revenue losses from their mistakes. GWA recently got a raise hike based in part on their need to increase competition for their staff to remain competitive with the private industry, which was a joke at that time because when I was at GWA offices, I didn't see any empty desks, you know, so it's not like GPA and GWA are competing, it's the other way around. The time has come maybe to divert maybe some of that increase to buying better quality equipment instead of penalizing ratepayers for their mistakes. I know you've all heard hundreds of stories on these back billing issues, but I am also a victim as well. When it comes to the back billing, the utilities act more like a criminal organization than a publicly held utility. I've heard many stories that people have shared with me about their back billing horror stories and how they are being put in financial hardships at the hands of the utility mafia as they extort money out of customers because they can. April this year, I called GWA to request a service call because my sewer line was backing up and had flooded my water meter box, putting my water meter and all the valves and everything under a foot of raw sewage. The crew came out, confirmed the problem, and informed me they were not allowed to perform any service because it was a Navy sewer line, and I would have to call DZSP 21. I called DZSP 21 while GWA's crew was on site to confirm the assertions. DZSP told me the sewer line had been turned over to government of Guam. I informed the crew DZSP records show that the line is government of Guam. I told the crew leader he called the GWA office and was told to deny me service because their records show the line is still Navy responsibility and left. So I spent the next 8 hours borrowing equipment to clean out the sewer line myself. Then in April, I got a water bill. And along with that water bill, I was back billed to January for sewage service. I brought this up with customer service that, I shouldn't have to pay this service, and had them check with their records to confirm my trouble call. But they told me that if I did not pay this amount, that my water would be disconnected. And so I know how the extortion racket works. You take the baby, you're going to kill the baby unless the money gets paid. So I paid some money, enough to prevent disconnection. And I told them that if they will reimburse me for my time, then I will pay the back bill. They told me they can't do that. I have to pay the 4 months. Even though we have documentation that they declared that they did not have responsibility for that line and refused to give me service, they are still threatening. Every month I get a letter telling me that unless I pay the following amount, my service will be disconnected. GWA has a lot of problems. The current back billing process allows them to continue to operate without a sense of urgency. If GWA had to absorb these kind of losses for their mistakes, I think that there would be a stronger sense of urgency in getting these problems rectified. 2 weeks ago, I called about a leak. I saw water bubbling up through the street in our compound. And we have sand and water bubbling up through the street. I called up GWA to report the leak. They said they'd have somebody there tomorrow. It's been 2 weeks and no one has shown up. I had the same problem with my power. My meter box shorted out. I had to replace the meter box. GPA had to replace the meter. And then immediately my power doubled. Now, I'm a senior citizen living on a fixed income. A $300 hit is a pretty hard hit to take, especially when I have a wife with a chronic illness and we have no medical coverage. So I raised this issue with GPA and they told me, you're just using more electricity because it's hotter. Well, I doubt it's 100% hotter than it was last year. And on top of that, earlier in the year, I had replaced 70% of my aging appliances. So I took a 16-SEER main AC unit in my living room and replaced it with a 31-SEER. I took a 26-SEER in my bedroom and replaced it with a 33-SEER. I took my 15-year-old Maytag's no-rated washer dryer and replaced them with energy-efficient LG units. And my power bill doubled. And the only explanation that GPA can give me is, well, it's been hotter. Well, when you look at the past 10 years, my power bill for 10 years was between $250 and $350 a month. For 10 years, to jump from 350 to 671. I think that there's something seriously wrong, and it's not that it was hotter. When I complained to GPA, they were going to have somebody come out and test my meter. We've had 2 appointments go by. I stay home all day waiting for the tester to come out, and when they don't come out, I'm informed that there was a service emergency. I'm still waiting to have my power meter tested, and until then, I'm paying the extortion, because unlike the water, I mean, I can get water other places, but my wife has a chronic medical condition, and temperature and her treatment equipment require electricity. So I'm forced to pay the extortion. And as senators, you're elected to represent the people in this issue. We're ratepayers, taxpayers, and technically owners of these utilities, but these utilities operate as if they are privately held corporation, and that needs to change. And the best way to change that is to change this law that allows them to extort money with impunity and without justification from a population that is largely struggling from paycheck to paycheck. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leon Guerrero. The next person on the list is Miguel Bradalio.
Afade, Madam Chair, Senators. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on Bill 188-35, which seeks to repeal GWA and GPA's ability to backbill customers for the use of water and power not included on past bills or not previously billed. Backbilling is an industry standard practice used in accordance with existing laws in the vast majority of states and utilities nationwide. In GWA's case, it is primarily intended as a means for customers to be billed fairly for water they consume when the meter is not functioning. And that is based on each customer's usage patterns and actual average daily consumption as determined over a 2-month period with a properly functioning meter. It's not based on a guess. It is not an average of everyone's usage. It is based on the daily average usage of that customer based on a properly functioning meter that has replaced the faulty meter. Eliminating this means for properly charging a customer for water that has been used will have the effect of providing free water to a customer anytime a meter, which is a mechanical device, fails. It is simply not reasonable to think that any mechanical device will function perfectly forever. All mechanical equipment, including meters, have a finite useful lifespan and will experience deterioration in performance over that lifespan. It is not possible to predict exactly when a meter will cease to function properly. GWA's experience with its own meter inventory proves that, and our experience is not significantly different from the experience of other utilities across the nation. GWA is opposed to Bill 188-35 as written because it eliminates an essential tool that GWA needs to deal with the realities of meter performance and lifespan in a fair manner to all customers. Bill 188 will in effect force GWA to increase water rates for all customers to make up for the lost revenue that will result from provisions included in this bill. Essentially for all customers to pay for the free water that would be provided if backbilling was eliminated. Bill 188 eliminates a method of revenue recovery that public utilities commissions and other regulatory oversight bodies across the nation recommend or require of their utilities to prevent unnecessary rate increases. If Bill 188 were to pass, it would set GWA's progress as a utility back by legislating an exception for a percentage of customers at the expense of all other customers. GWA acknowledges that there have been shortcomings in its business processes associated with the backbilling, which have negatively impacted our customers. Timeliness, information, and clarity have been lacking in our previous business process. The CCU has recognized these shortcomings and adopted through Resolution 18 FY 2019 a time standard to ensure that GWA's business process is improved and that the customer is afforded timely resolution, accurate information, and clarity about the process of backbilling. For these reasons, we oppose Bill 188. To provide a little more detail, there's sufficient detail in our written testimony, but I can go over some of it to correct some of the items that may have been discussed in previous testimony. GWA implemented an automatic meter reading system, also known as AMR, in 2005, installing 440,000 AMR-capable meters island-wide. At that time, or prior to using AMR technology, GWA employed about 12 meter readers to manually record customer usage across the island. During that time, with the difficulty that may have resulted from manually reading the meters, estimated bills made up about 7 to 8% of all customer billings. That's about 2,500 bills per month. Today, we use 5 meter readers, and they successfully capture over 42,000 monthly readings, with estimated billings averaging less than 1%, so down from 8% to 1%, and only about 280 customers per month. And these are essentially accounts for which we can get no electronic reading. With respect to back billing, over time, water meters begin to physically wear out and lose accuracy. It is impossible to determine, as I've stated, when meters will begin to fail, and there are several different factors that affect how that happens. Back billing customers for non-registering or low-flow water meters, as I mentioned, is an industry standard practice. Each jurisdiction within the 50 states and territories has their own different rules that allow the utilities to back bill. The allowable number of months to back bill ranges from 2 months to indefinitely. We, as you know, are limited to 4 months by law, and approximately 87% of utilities fall into that 4-month or more category. As I mentioned, we use a reasonable estimate based on actual average daily consumption of the customer during the 2 months following the replacement of a faulty meter. The current law provides a small window for GWA to identify faulty meters, replace them, and then bill for consumption. Bill 188 seeks to completely shut that window and deny GWA the opportunity to recover revenue for water that was actually used. Our typical back bill process starts when a meter is suspected of being failing or defective, at which point a field crew exchanges the faulty meter with a properly functioning one that has been tested. When the faulty meter is then taken back to our test bench facility and tested for accuracy. If it fails any of the 3 standards, AWWA standards for accuracy, the account is sent to the billing department to determine if a back bill is required. That review process takes into account the amount previously billed versus the average consumption based on that 2-month period where we have replaced it with a properly functioning meter. And if there is a variance, a back bill is issued. Prior to the improvements in our business process, there was not proper notice given that the meter was going to be changed. There was not proper explanation of the back bill when it was issued, and that results in some of the complaints that you've heard about. Another issue is the law currently provides 4 months prior to the faulty meter being identified and changed, the back bill period to extend that time, but there is the limitation on the amount of time for GWA to issue the back bill is 4 years. Now, we recognize that that is one of the shortcomings that we've had. It's been the amount of time it's taken to get that done. And so with the CCU's resolution, which sets a time standard for us to take care of all of the process within 6 months, we think that's fair and reasonable, and we are working our best right now to focus on that. And we've been performing for the meter change-outs that have happened since that time standard has passed. We've been complying with that. In terms of the estimated billing, again, this is an industry standard practice that is allowed in all 50 states and territories. 70% of those utilities fall into the same category as us is for 4 months or more in terms of the allowable estimated billings. We don't use it that often since we've gone to AMR. We do get reads, and if we get reads, they're zero. We issue a bill. It's not an estimated bill. But if the meter has failed and then we end up issuing a back bill, we're not issuing estimated bills, but we are back billing. The total amount of revenue back billed for failing meters between 2009 and 2014 was approximately $4.9 million, or 1.2% of total billed revenue over that period. In contrast, in 2016, with the current meter issues that we are having, we determined that it was a single model of Badger meter which was failing progressively. We've changed out 81% of those meters since January 2017, and the projected completion date will be the end of the year in 2019 for us to get all of them done. So the total amount of revenue backbilled for failing meters between 2017 and 2019 was $4.1 million, or 1.2% of total billed revenue. For 2020, we project that we may backbill an additional $1.2 million for the remaining meters that are being changed out currently. As I've indicated, the time standards that CCU has imposed upon us seeks to improve our performance in the business process, and it does allow for more information, more clarity in the process. We send a letter to the customers indicating that their water meter has been replaced within 2 weeks of the meter exchange date. For failed meters, we send customers a letter indicating that the meter was tested and the account is under review for potential backbilling. And then if a backbill is required, we issue the bill and send customers a letter with more clear and understandable calculations explaining the charges and how we arrived at the charges for their water consumption within that 4-month period. So we do have, as you know, a large capital improvement program that we are undertaking, and our revenues are critical to that. So the ability to recover revenues and forego unnecessary rate increases for that purpose is something that we would like to avoid. We also think that Bill 188, which would amend Title 12, Chapter 12, may be contrary to the indenture that GWA bondholders are subject to, and it would be an interference in essentially what should be a PUC process. And we would like to point out that the PUC does have a procedure for dealing with disputes on back bills, and so there is a remedy for customers. I would also like to point out that we have had instances in which customers that were back billed provided information to justify an adjustment to the back bill or a credit, and we've taken those instances into account as long as the estimates are reasonable. So GWA is not extorting anyone. We have a process in place. We're following it the best we can. We've improved our business process to provide customers with more accurate information, more timely information, and a timely resolution to any meter failures that would have impacted them. But the ultimate intent is to recover the cost for water that actually was consumed. There are several attachments to the written testimony which provide additional information and more clarity. Thank you for your time this afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Berdalio. I think if we can just pause here for some questions regarding the GWA issues. I think we can move on to GPA stuff, or perhaps maybe waiting to the end. Maybe we'll just wait till the end, just to be fair. Okay, so next on the list is John Beneventi.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Senators. Good afternoon. My name is John Beneventi, General Manager of Guam Power Authority. GPA respectfully submits this written testimony for Bill 188-35. GPA does not support Bill 188-35, its provision to eliminate back billing and estimated billing. Back billing and estimated billing is a standard practice throughout the United States for electric power, gas, water, and wastewater utilities. The National Regulatory Research Institute is a research arm of the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners and its members. NRRI indicates in a 2016 report that 48 of 50 states and the District of Columbia allows and regulates estimated billing and back billing, codifying it to their laws and utility governance. The 3 remaining jurisdictions may simply not have codified estimated billing and back billing. GPA has attempted and outreach for these jurisdictions, but has not received feedback from them yet. GPA and other United States utilities may issue estimated bills for several reasons. Using an estimated meter read because the utility does not have immediate access to a functioning meter. Using an estimated energy consumption because the utilities meter is not functioning properly, either over-registering, under-registering, or stop meters. Back billing is the process to true up a customer's billing statement in instances where estimated consumption data is used. It can be a credit for overestimation or a request for payment for underestimation. It is also billing for past services in the event of meter tampering or theft of power. Eliminating back billing outright eliminates GPA's right to recover theft of electric services. The bill estimation process has substantially improved in the last 10 years, while the number of back billing events have decreased. The installation of the advanced meter infrastructure, the implementation of an upgraded customer billing information software, and robotic process automation reduce the time it takes to discover and change out improperly functioning meters. Estimated billings are now based on actual daily consumption, resulting in more accurate bills and reducing back bills. States often cap the number of months customers can be subject to back billing except for the theft of electricity. They may require the back bill customers be provided the same amount of time to pay the bill amount as it took to accrue the amount. Current WAM law caps back billing at 4 months. The regulation of back billing and estimated billing, I believe, is under the purview of the Public Utilities Commission. Eliminating back billing could result in rate impacts to other customers and therefore should be left under the PUC to adjudicate for the protection of all ratepayers. As mentioned earlier, back billing and estimated billing are standard tools in utilities which help utilities work through metering issues which can occur in the industry. GPA under its bond indenture is not allowed to provide free service. Consequently, eliminating the tools of back billing and estimated billing would result in free service being provided to some at the expense of other ratepayers. Additionally, since this is an important tool related to rates for the industry, eliminating these tools, I believe, will be considered interfering with the powers of the PUC, which could consequently impact our bond covenants and ratings by the major rating agencies. One Power Authority works with its ratepayers to ensure equitable reimbursement for service provided. We will continue to make all efforts to ensure all customers are reasonably billed for service. In doing so, we avoid having to place additional burdens on other customers with properly functioning meters. Meters have a finite life and do fail for various reasons. Regulatory commissions and utilities have accepted estimated billings and back billings as the tools necessary for the equitable charging of services due to meter failures. One Power Authority asked that the legislature leave the issue of estimated billing and back billing to the Public Utilities Commission, Consolidated Commission on Utilities, and the ratepayers. One Power Authority will continue to strive for fair and equitable billings for service to its customers. Thank you for the opportunity to testify on Bill 188-35. I do have an attachment which shows a summary of the areas that do estimated billing and back billing and the different categories that they use it for. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Beneventi. Next on the list, we have Mr. Simon Sanchez.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and buenas senators of the committee. Guajosi Simone Sanchez, ratepayer and elected member of the Consolidated Commission on Utilities. I testify this afternoon against the passage of Bill 35-188, a poorly conceived piece of legislation that will force higher rate increases on all ratepayers while allowing a small number of ratepayers to receive free utility services, even though they continue to receive services while their meter failed to properly record their usage. The proposed bill ignores the fundamental rate-setting principle that all ratepayers should pay for the services they receive. The proposed bill effectively penalizes ratepayers with working meters while providing an unnecessary windfall of free service to ratepayers whose meters happen to fail. Unlike most other services and commodities that you are pre-billed and prepay before you use them, utility services are provided first and then are back-billed after services are provided, based on the consumption that occurred prior to the billing. So all utility billing begins with the premise that you provide the service first and then you back bill. And that's a fundamental difference in the way you buy 99% of all the other commodities. This approach recognizes the essential necessity of power and water by allowing these services to be advanced first, then back billed afterwards. During the time services are advanced without payment, some meters can fail, like any electromechanical device can and will. When a meter fails, the ratepayer still receives services even though the meter is not measuring usage accurately or at all. The universally accepted concepts of back billing and estimated billing attempt to provide a reasonable estimate of ratepayer usage during the time a ratepayer's current meter fails and the time a working meter replaces it. When a ratepayer cannot be billed for services actually received, the cost of these services are eventually paid by other ratepayers through higher rate increases, which is not fair to the other ratepayers. Ratepayers have enough challenges paying their own utility bills and shouldn't be forced to pay another ratepayer's services in addition. As the testimonies of both utilities show, nearly all, if not all, states and territories in the United States allow for back billing and estimated billing. This bill would eliminate what the overwhelming number of other communities believe is good and fair public policy that balances the interests of all ratepayers. While GPA has some challenges with back billing, most of the recent problems, are with the GWA process. GWA General Manager Bordallo's testimony provides an excellent summary of the history of GWA's meter change-out program. The history shows 2 periods of significant meter failure which had to be addressed, and it details the changes GWA has made to better implement existing back billing policy. The GWA testimony shows that since 2009, about $10 to $11 million in higher rate increases would have been required on all ratepayers if this bill was law. So let me say that again. If this bill was law over the last 10 years, it would have resulted in a $10 to $11 million higher rate increase on all ratepayers. GWA has made tremendous progress in reducing the number of ratepayers affected by back billing and estimated billing from 2,500 a month prior to the move to AMR meter technology after 2005 to 280 customers today, 280 customers a month today, a reduction of almost 90% in estimated billing incidents. GWA testimony also shows GWA's extensive efforts to model our efforts with nationally recognized best industry practices, including the purchase of a $1 million test bench and more and better contact with potentially affected ratepayers. And GWA is pursuing all of its remedies with the current meter supplier to hold the current meter supplier accountable for their failed meters. While we still must improve on this process, the progress from where we were before and where we have come now is clear to those who wish to objectively see the facts. I was pleased to see that our utility management proposes an amendment to the law that will speak to the most common complaint about recent back billing, that it took GWA too long to notify customers about a back bill. The CCU had brought up the idea of shortening the front end of the back billing process. While I believe that the CCU should adopt this new policy administratively, instead of waiting for new law, offering an improvement to the current law is a much better idea than completely eliminating back billing as proposed. Finally, as an author of over 30 public laws and a frequent participant in the writing and passing of effective legislation over the past 30 years, I was disappointed that the bill contains no legislative intent to guide the taxpayer, ratepayer, or other senators like yourselves, the governor, nor the court as to why and how this bill serves the public interest. The bill's author fails to provide any discussion nor facts as to the history or extent of the problem he is trying to solve. The public and the three branches of government are left to guess as to what the intent of the bill is and what its impacts would be. There is no mention that the bill would lead to higher rate increases on every ratepayer. There is no mention that the bill proposes a policy that almost no one else in the country follows, because such a policy would be unfair to all ratepayers. There's no mention of the nearly 90% reduction in estimated billing incidents over the past decade. There is no mention that if this bill were already law, another 10 million plus in rate increases would have had to have been passed on to all the ratepayers this past decade. And there's no mention that if this bill is passed now, another 2 to 3 million in additional rate increases to cover estimated but still pending back bills in FY 2020 would have to be passed on to all ratepayers as higher rate increases in the future. And you can find some of these numbers on GWA testimony page 6. But thankfully, today we have a public hearing to allow for more information and perspectives to be exchanged on the record. Bill 185 is poorly conceived public policy. It is unfair to all ratepayers and will result in higher rate increases in the future to cover the cost of a few customers who still receive service for which their meter failed to record their usage. The bill fails to provide any justification for changing the law, nor mentions any of the adverse impacts of the bill on ratepayers. Bill 185 proposes the same kind of legislation that led to the complete collapse of GPA and GWA in the 90s, when senators tried to set rate policy and run the utilities without completely understanding the issues. It was why the law was changed to allow ratepayers to directly elect their representatives to manage their utilities through their CCU. The same ratepayer voters that allow you to sit in the legislature have selected 5 citizens to run their utilities as a better option than allowing the utilities to revert back to the practice back in the 80s and 90s when the legislative interference in the rate setting process allowed a default at GPA, the creation of an independent PUC to get the bailout from Congress for that default, and begin the process of taking the senators and the governor out of the day-to-day management of the utilities, because, as all of you know, it is extremely difficult for a senator or a governor to become a subject matter expert in all the fields that you're having to address, much less the utilities that provide an essential service. The collective wisdom of this community over the last 20 years was to keep the legislature and the governor out of rate setting and the daily governance of the utilities. And both GPA and GWA have made significant progress since that change, and since ratepayers directly elected their representatives who could acquire the expertise and the experience to propose and implement the effective public policy that would improve our utilities. Please, senators, do not pass Bill 185. Let's not go backwards. We have far too many other problems to deal with than to have to go back to the day where perhaps a well-meaning senator tries to improve a process for which it is clear he doesn't understand. Sujusmasi.
Sujusmasi, Commissioner Sanchez. My apologies. I'd like to recognize Senator Kelly Marsh Taitano, who's joined us here today. Thank you, Senator. So next on the list, we have Mr. Sanagastine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And good afternoon, Senators. Thank you for having me here. I'm sitting here and like the average citizen, everybody else, like yourselves as a ratepayer, I'm taken aback how the utility corporations are here, our big guys are here, and approaching this bill in a manner of being a bully. Whereas this is what we say, this is what we know, and you, Joe Public, don't know anything. I heard the testimony from GWA speaking about it's not an estimated bill. It's an actual bill. If Tan Maria pays a bill on average under $100 and has been paying that for years, living by herself in the lowly village of Talafofo, and all of a sudden her meter goes out, and the law allows, and mind you, the gentleman next to me was a part of the governing body that passed a law that allows for the government to back bill 4 months. That was passed 24 years ago. And that's great. So how does a woman who has been paying a bill under $100 for years, living by herself, get back bill for 4 months, a bill over $1,000? How does that happen? I heard that there's a mechanism in place to ensure that the back billing is as accurate as can be. How accurate is that? And then how do we come across to our most vulnerable, our senior citizens, our manomko, and try to explain to them the jargon of all this, all the technicalities of the engineering that's behind it, what it costs to produce power. And these things do cost money, the staffing and everything. But everything and the way it's being portrayed from these guys is, at the end of the day, it's still going to fall on the shoulders of the ratepayers. And that upsets me. That bothers me as a concerned citizen, because I'm sure your offices get knocked on, your doors get knocked on, your phones rings off the hook, hearing from your constituents, your voters telling you, I don't know what to do. I can't pay my water, I won't have water. I can't afford this power, but I don't know why it's like this. Now, I hear we've invested $1 million in a state-of-the-art test bench to test the GWA meters. How about investing in just good meters? How about just knowing from the get-go that somebody that's a senior citizen is going to get an actual, true estimated billing? Not this billing and mind you, when they receive it, they're crying, saying, I don't know why this bill is over $1,000. How am I supposed to pay this? And they're told on the other end, well, that's the bill. You just have to pay it. Whether they're given a payment plan, and that's great, bottom line, they still have to pay it, because that was the estimation given to the ratepayer. And that's hard for some people. It's hard for a lot of people, as a matter of fact, myself included. We hear about the advancements with GPA, and I'm great to hear that. Can they guarantee me that when there's a fluctuation in the power, that my compressor is not going to go out on my air conditioning unit? The PC board on my AC unit is not going to burn out? The compressor on my refrigerator is not going to go out? I'm all for keeping these entities afloat. I'm all for the advancements in technologies. But something as simple as I can't pay this water bill because I wasn't accurately given an estimation. They were estimating on, I don't know what math they were using. It hurts. The power fluctuated. My air conditioner blew out. There's no real mechanism that's tangible for a senior citizen to say, I can go down to GPA and they're going to help me fix this. They're going to help me get some money to replace my unit if need be. And if you don't believe me, go to the website. See if there's anywhere on the GPA website that says file a claim. Because there is none. There's nowhere where I can file a claim. There's nowhere, and it's hard. So what happens there is we, the end users, our equipment burns out. We just end up eating the cost. And rightly so. In your failures, eat the cost. If we have to hold your employees more accountable to be real public servants, because as government employees, we are accountable to the public, and we should be held to a standard, especially when it comes to the treatment of the people who call in. And if we can't manage the staffing to be on that same level that you guys are, because you guys are obviously on a level of professionalism that I think that will be well taken from the public. If the staff can't deliver that, then address that if that needs to be. And you've heard it. We've had our problems with addressing the issues to the ratepayers. We can't properly explain why it's so high. The bill's been passed for 24 years, and you still can't explain why the bill is so high. Fix that. Fix that for Tamaria. Por favor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. San Agustin. Is there anyone else who would like to testify? Okay, so we're moving on to questions. So this is a question for General Manager Miguel Bradalio. So you had mentioned in your testimony that the back billing for 2009 to 2014 was roughly 4.9 million. Is that correct? And then you also mentioned the same numbers for 2016. I'm wondering if that was a...
I believe, Madam Chair, 2009 to 2014, 4.9 million, and then the other number was 4.19 million for 2017 through 2019.
There seems to be, like, I guess, two main groups here. One is the time where there wasn't a responsiveness by GWA in regards to back billing. And now we have the resolution, CCU's resolution 18 FY19, I believe, which basically limits to 4 months. So for those customers that were, is that correct?
Yes.
So I guess one of the issues to me is the lack of response, and then these customers having to pay these large sums, or at least they're asked to pay these large sums of money. How has GWA addressed that issue?
So the lack of responsiveness and the lack of information in the back billing business process previously was something GWA should have been prepared for, just based on the experience from the 2009 to the 2014 period with the first meter change-out program that went into effect. Unfortunately, we weren't prepared for that, and the concern was with trying to address so soon after that incident a second meter change-out program with the meters that were purchased to resolve the first incident. So what we've done in trying to develop and improve the business process is to send out more notifications of each of the activities that are required in order to resolve the issue: the replacement of the meter, the testing of the meter, and then the determination of whether a back bill is issued. So notices are sent for all of those, and we've also, in the last notice when we issue the back bill, provide more information on how that number was arrived at and how the calculation occurred. In the previous process, there was practically no information provided on that, and that's a shortcoming that we've been working to address. With regards to the second part of your question, which was if consumers have now a large amount to pay, we do offer an extended pay plan for those back bill customers.
Yeah, I think the issue is back then the management was not as on top of, or at least they weren't as responsive. So I think it calls into question the accuracy of the bills themselves. And what sort of validation do you have pertaining to their billing, the back billing in that regard?
So the performance of the meters that we've been replacing brings into question the accuracy of the meters, and I understand that. We have implemented a quality assurance QA/QC program for the meters where we test meters before they are deployed to ensure that they're accurate. Before we even issue a back bill, we test the meter that we've pulled to verify that it has failed the AWWA meter standards. So the testing is there to document that we have tested these meters against the primary standard, and that we've verified that there was an actual failure, and that the bill that is being issued is based on a properly functioning meter that was also QA/QC tested before it was deployed. I can say that until I'm blue in the face, but Unfortunately for the customers, that doesn't necessarily instill the type of confidence that it should in GWA's ability to properly meter and provide the services that it provides. And that's something that we have to overcome. We recognize that there are shortcomings in the business process, but I can assure you that I'm doing the most that I can to try and improve that process and to restore the credibility of GWA to its consumers.
So a lot of the focus on back billing has been on false negatives. What about the false positives where you're seeing large amounts, large increases, and oftentimes it's been told that it's a leak somewhere, but when investigation is done, there's no leak to be found?
So I will say that in several cases, in many cases, what happens is the meters that fail on the low flow and mid flow tests. So there are 3 tests that we conduct when we pull the meter. If it's low flow, during periods when there should be no consumption, from the time that you go to bed to the time that you wake up in the morning, there should be no consumption, and that will show on the log. If a properly functioning meter recognizes that flow, it'll log it, and then in the normal process, there will be a flag that the meter picks up and goes into the customer service and billing system, and it'll show up on your bill that you have continuous water usage and you may have a leak. With the meters that fail that, until they've been changed out, we aren't receiving that flag and it's not showing up on your bill. So there have been instances where we've issued a back bill after we changed out the meter, and the 2 months that we use subsequent to that change out to calculate the actual consumption is probably elevated because now we have a properly functioning meter and there is a leak flag that shows. And so when the customer service department says that you may have a leak, it's because when the meter was changed out, now we're detecting that flow, and that's the reason that the back billed amount may be high. But in instances where that has been the case, we have had people come in and say, I know I don't use that much in average water, and I would have, now I realize that I have a leak. I would have fixed the leak if I had known, but your meter didn't tell me that I had a leak, and there was no indication. And they had to go dig for it. But in those types of cases, there have been adjustments made to the bills.
So your automated readers, they can actually are sensitive to pick up potential leaks?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes. If there's continuous 24-hour usage that is picked up by the meter, it'll flag the system, and then the system, when it prints your bill, will generate a note on your bill that says 24-hour usage was detected, you may have a leak.
And this is a delta, I'm assuming it's a delta check? So it shows significant changes or fluctuations.
It shows continuous usage over a 24-hour period, which is not a normal usage pattern.
Okay. So going back to the estimated amount that's back billed, so we have $4.19 million. So I'm just curious, are there other costs that GWA pays for that's subsumed under the rates or the bills, the billing?
I'm not sure if
is everything, so basically is the cost, is the bill itself purely for water consumption?
These amounts that I've referred to?
Or just in general, the bill itself, is it just water consumption alone? Is that what the customer is being billed for?
Go ahead, Chris.
So on a back bill, the only additional amounts that are going to be billed are for water that's consumed. So the bill itself has sometimes up to 5 parts if you also have sewer service. So the 5 parts would be the basic water rate, and then there's the lifeline rate, which is the rate you pay for the first 5,000 gallons. Then there's the non-lifeline rate, which is everything over 5,000, and then the supplemental annuity charge. When a back bill is generated, it's only based on the lifeline rate, the non-lifeline rate, and the supplemental annuity charge, which is actually a percentage of the non-lifeline rate, so the consumption over 5,000 gallons. So there's no other charges that would show up in a back bill except for the water consumption.
Senator, if I may, and correct me if I'm wrong, so commercial accounts for sewer there's a meter on the commercial on the sewer side. But for residential accounts, the water, your regular monthly usage is for residential, which is 39 out of our 42,000 customers. Is the residential rate a function of the consumption, or is it just a flat fee?
On the sewer side, it's a flat rate.
For all residential
For all
customers?
residential. For commercial, there is no meter on the sewer side, but
percentage.
it's a percentage of your water consumption
Right.
that is applied to the sewer.
So the sewer side on residential is a flat rate. The commercial side is a percentage applied to your consumption. So it does take into account how much water you take in. I think it's 80% of that water you take in on the commercial side. You're also charged a sewer side, but on the residential side, it's strictly a flat rate. So I think that's what Mr. Badassi is referring to when the back billing for the number of gallons that you are now being charged for because your meter was under registering. You're charged the water rate, the lifeline, and the lifeline rate, and the applicable water rate. And Miguel and Chris, does that affect the sewer bill on that same bill, or no? That just remains the same. So it's just on the water side. So in effect, the back billing only affects the incremental addition of water being used. It doesn't for residential customers. It doesn't touch the sewer side. That just remains a flat fee. So I just wanted to make sure we get that distinction. There are commercial accounts whose sewer rate or sewer bill is determined by their consumption of water, a percentage of that consumption of water, and a rate applied to that consumption of water. Whereas on the residential side, your only consumption-based charge is the water side, but your sewer side is a flat rate, and back billing only touches the water side of residential customers. It doesn't add to the commercial rate. So in effect, the back billing for commercial, there is no back billing for residential commercial.
Sorry, you said there's back billing for residential but not commercial?
There is for back billing, a residential account, you're billed for the differential of usage on the water side, but your fixed sewer, it just stays there because it's fixed. It doesn't care whether you use 10,000 gallons, 5,000 gallons, or 1,000 gallons a month. Your sewer is a flat $25, $30. Also, we should note that almost half our customers don't even pay that rate because they're not on the sewer system. They are with septic tanks, which is a totally different issue. So when you look at the rate impact too, only half of our residential customers are at risk they're all at risk for water back billing, and none of them are at risk for sewer back billing because either they're not getting a sewer bill because they're not on the sewer system, or the back billing doesn't apply to their fixed sewer consumption. Only does it apply to the commercial side.
I beg to differ. I'm being back billed on sewer.
Well, bring that to us. If it's incorrect, they'll change it, but if it's correct, they'll assess it.
Okay, so I guess I'll just pass the floor to my colleagues for questions. Senator Rigel.
All right, I guess this question is for both GWA and GPA. How many meters have been replaced since you began replacing, how many defective meters have been replaced? Since you switched to, first for GWA, correct me if I'm not mistaken, you began replacing defective meters after you switched from the analog meters to digital meters or the radio read meters, correct?
That's correct. So I think when we went to AMR, it was around 40,000 meters. The entire meter system was changed out. Since that time, there was a massive meter failure with, the first meter change out was because of the stipulated order that required us to go with the AMR system. When we implemented the AMR system, the meter that was selected to be installed was a Metron Fournier meter, and after about 3 years, I believe, we started to see failures, massive failures with those meters, and so there was a round of a meter replacement program to replace all of those. Since that time, those were replaced with Badger meters.
So about how many approximately were those meters?
About 40,000 meters.
So 40,000 of the AMR meters, the new ones.
Right.
Those were replaced.
Right.
With another set, the Badger meters.
The Badger meters.
Different vendor.
And then, and the decision or the procurement for the Badger meters was based on the quality of the product that was delivered. It wasn't necessarily just a low bid number. So at that time, GWA and management used an RFP process to make sure that they were getting the appropriate meters for the system. Unfortunately, the meter that was recommended, after 5 years of those meters being in service, we started to see failure for one particular model. So there were several models that were supplied as part of that procurement, but one particular model, we started to see a trend in failures. And subsequent to, in our research, we've determined that it appears to be what we believe is a manufacturer's defect in the production of those meters. And so the meter change out for those started under warranty with the manufacturer. And that number, the total number of meters that we anticipate changing out, is somewhere on the order of 32,000 meters.
Those are the ones that are currently being changed out
Yes.
now at this time?
Yes, that's correct.
So 40,000 and 30,
72,000, roughly.
so the total was what? I'm sorry?
About 72,000.
What's the total cost of that?
I'm sorry, I don't know the total cost for the first meter change out. I can tell you that for the LP meters, the initial meters were being changed out on warranty, so there was no cost. And we're currently in a dispute with the meter manufacturer. I don't know the exact number but I can get that to you for the amount that we've spent so far on those LP meter changeouts.
Okay. Those costs, are they factored into rates?
The costs of the meters changeouts are part of our operating expenses, and so they will show up as when we do our 5-year financial plan as part of the cost of doing business. So they are reflected in the rates.
So they do factor into rates.
Yeah.
So does the recovered revenue.
So how is it determined that a meter is malfunctioning?
Well, from the meter reads, we can see if there is consumption based on whether the meter register, the read that comes back, shows an increase over the prior month's readings. For the current meter changeout program, we're seeing the flags that there is no consumption or low consumption, and that sends a flag out, which then generates a field activity for our personnel to go out and change that meter. But we don't make the determination that it has malfunctioned until after we've pulled it from service and then tested it on the test bench. And at that point, then we've determined factually whether it has failed based on that meter testing.
But you remove it from the site and then test it?
We remove it from service, bring it to the test bench facility, and then test it there.
Which is away from the site?
That's correct.
So you basically go out when something's flagging, showing that there's either under, or do you do it for overconsumption too, something that shows it more than normal consumption?
There is no flag, to my knowledge, for high consumption. As I mentioned, if the consumption is 24 hours, then there's a flag generated for a leak, but there isn't a flag for overconsumption.
So for me, I experienced personally, my meter was changed out. And when I went into customer service, they said it was flagged for overconsumption. I was told, maybe you have a leak. I had no leak. There was no leak. Upon further questioning, I determined from them, they determined that there was a problem with the meter around the same month that I moved my parents into my house with me. They're elderly, I take care of them now. When they moved in, that's when they saw the increase in consumption. So I fought it. I asked them, this is not fair, this isn't right. Why am I paying for an estimated billing, especially because it's based on dates that A, my parents weren't living with me. B, it was actually based on dates prior to the meter showing that it was malfunctioning. So that shows me two things that are wrong with it. A, they're estimating based off of rates for a time when I had less people living with me. And B, I was back billed during a time prior to the meter showing that it was malfunctioning. So is that a part of the normal practice? Are you able to back bill for months when you're not sure if the meter was functioning out. So what I'm getting at is if the meter is, say it's September, say a customer's meter goes out today in September, and then you replace it in a few days, or maybe you replace it in a week, are you able to back bill to the other months before the meter was shown that it was defective?
Go ahead.
So the answer is we would look at the possibility of back billing it from 4 months after the meter was believed to be failing. So that we would look at your history and determine if it looks like the meter failed in mid-October, we would look at anything back to 4 months back and base it off of the average consumption of the new meter.
There, and that's my primary problem with the back billing law as it's written. And that's what I was actually told by customer service representatives. They said, how can you back bill me for these months when the meter was working for all intents and purposes? You only saw something that indicated to you that it could potentially not be working in month A, but you back bill me 4 months prior to that, even after changing out the new meter. And the response I was given was, sir, that's the law, and so we're allowed to do it. And that's why I've proposed this law, to remove that, so that you're not able to back bill for months where you're not even sure if the meter was working or not.
So technically, I guess that response could be considered correct in that it is the law, but in the process that we're implementing, we're comparing after the faulty meter was replaced, we're looking at your average consumption for 2 months. We're taking the daily average, and then from the point that we changed the meter out, we're applying it up to 4 months back by taking your average consumption from your corrected meter, so it's based on your usage patterns, and then applying it to the number of days in the billing period and comparing that consumption versus what was actually billed. And if the consumption is higher than what was actually billed, then the difference is what we back bill.
All right, I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rigel. Senator Biscoli.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you very much, gentlemen, for joining us this afternoon and providing your testimony. Mr. Bradalio, in your testimony, you acknowledged that there have been some shortcomings in GWA's business processes, and then you also mentioned a resolution that you passed, Resolution 18, FY 2019. Is that correct? And
yes, Senator.
Would it be possible for you to provide that to the committee? I don't believe it's in any of the attachments that you provided.
No, a summary is provided on one of the slides, but we'll be happy to provide you with the resolution.
I also just wanted to give you an opportunity maybe to address some of the constituents that are here, maybe some constituents who might be watching. And I wanted to just ask you, what would you say to members of the community who, again, some who have testified here, who have used their hard-earned money to keep the water running, keep the lights going. My family and I, we've also been victims of a back billing nightmare. We were charged for tens of thousands of gallons of water, and we've had to pay it. Just like Mr. Leon Guerrero and Senator Rigel had mentioned, when you have young children and those with chronic illnesses in your home, there's no option to have the lights go off or the water to be shut off. So, and I know you understand this, but I think one of the biggest problems of this entire issue is really a customer service issue. And so when we have gone in to try to rectify this, and Mr. Calvo had mentioned it as well, he spent 15 months on the phone with GWA attempting to rectify this, bringing the issue to your attention, and going in, and that just, time is money. So you go in and you try to rectify it, and you think, okay, I'm going to be waiting in this line for about an hour. All I have is my lunchtime, but I need to get this rectified. So, or you're on the phone, or you go in person to try to rectify this, and oftentimes it's not one visit. It's multiple visits, and then you're speaking to multiple different people, and I'm sure you've heard this all before, but it becomes a nightmare for the people that we're attempting to serve. Yes. And when everything's all good, it's all good. You don't hear from anybody. But when it's not all good, that's when we all hear from everybody, and I'm sure, again, you understand that. So I just wanted to give you an opportunity to maybe address that with some of the people who have come today.
Sure. So the previous business process, we recognized there were shortcomings. The whole having to, I think Mr. Calvo mentioned working with Mr. Craddock. I think that was in the 2009 to 2014 period. As I mentioned, that was a change that was required by the stipulated order, and then a change that was required because what we put in failed. And that was a low bid type situation. So we understand that the process was a burden to many of the ratepayers, and our customer service department, for this current meter change-out process, has been working really hard to try and address all the issues that come up. But as you can imagine, there are several, and so I would venture to say that although they do their best and try to be as flexible as possible, they have, if there's documentation that it can be provided. For example, we've had customers come in and say, you've back billed me for this period, but I can tell, based on 2 months of usage when I was here, but I can tell you that during the 4 months that you back billed me, I was off island for, almost the whole month, and so I couldn't have used that much water. And so the customer service department worked with them to provide the proper documentation, and once the documentation was done, they wrote up justification to adjust the back bill, which was sent up and approved. So they are doing their best to be flexible about handling individual customer requests, but just the volume of meter changes that we have to do, maybe we are not being as attentive and responsive as we could be, and for that I apologize. But we are, as I mentioned, trying to improve the process. That 15-month period, I think, even at the beginning of this meter change-out process, I can't speak to what happened previously as I was not there, but at the beginning of this meter change-out process, it did take us a long time, and I think part of that was because of the experience and the public outcry over the last back billing instance. The finance department was very cautious and wanted to be very conservative in its approach, and so the testing had to be done, and they wanted the test results. They added to the length of time it needed to get the issue resolved out of an abundance of caution for being criticized for issuing a back bill without having test results in hand, and so on and so forth. So in the beginning of that meter change-out process, it did take us longer than it should have, and we ended up back billing for a period that would have been a year prior. And that's poor business on our part, but as I mentioned, we're working to improve that. We now have the time standard in place, and we're doing a much better job of shortening that period. We still recognize that it's burdensome to the ratepayers, and we do apologize, but it is part of the business that has to be conducted. It's just part of the work that we have to do.
Thank you, Mr. Bedalia. You also made mention of a process in your testimony where there's a process in place where you can review some of the issues on a case-by-case basis. Can you please inform the committee of what exactly this process is, and maybe let customers know how they can or how they might be able to take advantage of the consideration?
So I believe the way the law is written now, it sets out the method by which the back bill is calculated, but it says or other reasonable estimate that may be approved by the PUC. So there is a PUC element or PUC avenue for customers to take if they dispute the method that we use to calculate a back bill. But even insofar as we are able to calculate a back bill, as I mentioned in that example I just gave, if there are extenuating circumstances that can be documented, then we're happy to adjust the bill.
Thank you. And they can just avail of that by calling your regular customer service, the regular customer service number?
They can ask to speak to a customer service supervisor who will take the information and work with the utility services administrator, and then if the documentation and the situation allows for an adjustment, they'll send it up to management for review and approval.
Mr. Bedalia, I also wanted to ask, would GWA be open to extending the eight-month payment plan option to give customers additional time to make payment?
In short, yes, we would be.
Maybe over the course of 12 months or something? Because I just know so many people who are on fixed income that just the idea of even spreading out a $200 bill or a $300 bill over 8 months, it's challenging for them. So we just want to make sure we give them enough opportunity to try to make good if that's what the case may be.
Yes.
Senator, if I may add, even though the law limited it to 4 months, the CCU and prior management administratively changed it to 8. We worked with Speaker Barnes on that.
And you're also able
we could make that administratively. We could put it in the legislation. But there's an example of, I'm just trying to show you an example that even though some things are not in the law, we're not afraid to try to work with the ratepayers and the customers to make, to make it as doable as possible. We recognize this is after they've already used it, and yes, they've already used it. So one hand says you need to pay. On the other hand, as the general manager has identified, this recent second surge of failed meters with the current supplier, is why you're getting all the calls, is why we're getting all the calls. And we became very concerned that we think the current law does a good job of limiting the back end. The most you can go back is 4 months. If that meter's been busted 12 months, 10 months, you can only get 4. But we began to discuss, maybe we need to shorten the front end so that we don't wait 2 years to give Don Maria a bill. I can appreciate why you're getting calls, and we get the same calls and the same stop at the grocery store. So we have administratively said, let's shorten it. That's why, and I'm glad management is willing to work with you to see maybe we can put it in the law to shorten the front end. Our main objection to this bill is it just throws the whole thing out, all back billing and all estimated billing out, which then is only going to make everyone's power and water bill go up because people that otherwise got the service are getting it for free.
Thank you, Senator. That's my second question and something that I was going to just pose to you. So on page 2, you had mentioned that the CCU had brought up the idea of shortening the front end of back billing process. So what would that look like in terms of what you're discussing?
Management has recommended 6 months. We could talk about 8 months. We could talk with you folks on a collaborative effort. What do you think is reasonable? We think we need to get to customers more quickly to let them know there's a problem and not wait 1 or 2 year surprises. And we also so we want to close the front end. I would agree with that. I'm going to propose, and I'm pretty sure most commissioners would be open to the fact that whether or not you pass a law change, we may change it anyway, as we did where we extended the payback time to 8 months. We could do it administratively. We could put it in the law. We're flexible that way. We're just very concerned about removing back billing completely, which is how we read the bill. Is it completely eliminates back billing. It gives free service to people who otherwise still got the service. It eliminates an attempt to estimate some usage because the meter failed. It's nobody's fault. It just fails, right? And you don't know it fails until you buy it. Just like when you buy a car and you find out you got a lemon, it's after the fact. That's why you have warranties. That's why all these suppliers have warranties. That's why we changed from Metron Farnier in the 09s and 10s to Badger. And Badger is one of the largest suppliers of meters in the world. So, it's not like we have 300 meter suppliers that say, I want to bid, and like any product government procurement procures, there is always the risk that the product you buy, the widget you buy could fail, which is why all procurements require performance bonds, damage, failure to implement. There's protections because no one can guarantee that the widget you buy from an otherwise valid procurement will never fail. In fact, it's silly to expect that they're never going to fail. Everyone has a meter charge on your power or water bill just to be our customer. And we use that money to replace all power meters and all water meters because over a 10 to 15 year period, they're all going to fail. And it's our job to make sure we keep one in front, keep a working meter on your behalf so that we're only billing you for what you're using. But that means that's why you have every state and territory in the union saying, hey, if we're going to advance utility services, because it's essential, power and water, we don't want you to, Simon, you got to pay for tomorrow's power. How the hell do I know, right? So here's an essential commodity that is priced and charged and paid for very differently than 99% of all other commodities. It's essential. But because it advances the service first, and measures your consumption during the period of advancement, if that measuring device fails, the majority of communities, the great majority of communities have said, if that meter fails, we need to find as reasonable a process that doesn't penalize ratepayers with working meters to pick up someone's free service and provide a windfall to those that happen to win the broken meter lottery that month. You can see a tremendous effort has been spent to bring down the number of issues, right? And when you look at it from both, now we're down to a couple hundred. We bill 40,000 people a month, so 200 problems with billing. Well, it's possible, but it still is only about 1 or 2% of our revenue. So it's not a rampant failure of $10-20 million a year of free service to some people and others. It really averages out, and we've had 2 bad episodes. The first successful bidder, Metron Farnier, you can Google them; they're big, but it didn't work out right. And one of the things we learned with these meters is how unique Guam's particular environment and how harsh it is on meters. And then we added to these meters a device that automatically reads them. At GPA, we put in a whole smart grid. It's very connected. GWA doesn't have that same benefit. And we don't want to buy meters that say once it stops turning, we cut off the water. Right. We don't want to do that. So there has to be some mechanism that says you're still going to get the water from your utility, even if your meter fails.
Right.
And what's a reasonable way to deal with it? And best practices and the way other communities have looked at it is in exchange for giving that essential service first, power and water first. Right now, everyone's getting power and water. We don't know if you're going to pay the bill next month, but we give it to you. But in exchange for giving these essential services first, there has to be a mechanism that protects ratepayers with working meters from also having to pick up the tab of meters that happen to fail for other ratepayers. If you imagine if it's a large hotel whose meter fails, I mean to have that paid for, just blindly paid for by all other ratepayers, we think would be grossly unfair. But unfortunately, the way the bill is written, it eliminates all back billing. And so it forces the fact that Hotel X could have a meter fail tonight, and until, as Miguel has described, we have to go out there, we read the meters, we process it, we put in another meter, we measure that for a couple of months to determine the back billing. Why should Hotel X get any free service? But this bill would allow Hotel X or Simon Sanchez to have free service. And when this bill was written in the early 90s, Chairman Duenas and I got together with the legislature, because even back then you didn't have AMR technology. You had 12 folks went out there, tried to read the meter. Hopefully there's no dog, there's no car, there's no whatever blocking it, right? And we realized that was a problem. So in the first court order, US EPA and GWA agreed, hey, one problem we got to solve is the cash register. We got to get a better cash register. We got to get one that reads better, one that we can read remotely, just so that even if you have a bad dog, we can read it, because the whole idea is to balance the interests of the ratepayer with the failed meter with the interests of the other ratepayers who have a working meter, and try not to let free service go without any attempt to recover it. And as the testimony shows, there's been 2 bad episodes. The first episode with Metron Farnier, $4 or $5 million. Now the episode we're having with Badger, which I think Miguel has done an excellent job when you get into the detail of holding Badger responsible. They're replacing meters under warranty, and there may be other mechanisms that we are looking at to make sure Badger is responsible.
So Senator, you were mentioning there's 40,000 ratepayers currently, is that correct?
That's about right. Is that right, Miguel? That's about right, 42,
I think
40?
42,000.
42,000.
Yeah. 39 and 3 is the number I remember.
Saying that maybe under a couple of hundred with issues.
A couple hundred a month is the number that management has
So
reported.
I'd agree with you that I think that's a really great rate. We've come a long way, but still, when you're one of those 100 people, it makes it a real big challenge. And so I think, just in conclusion, Madam Chair, I want to thank you for taking the opportunity to hear this bill. I want to thank the author of this bill for giving us the opportunity to have this discussion, and thank you all for being here, providing your testimony. I'm hopeful that we'll get to the bottom of this. So thank you very much again for your time.
Thank you, Senator Lee. Senator Talahi.
Thank you, Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you all for your testimony. It's a very it's not an easy issue for me to understand. I'll admit that right away. So, and just because generally, you know, we've talked a lot over the years about the different meter systems, but maybe you can just clarify a couple things. So, particularly GWA. If you have 40,000 ratepayers currently, and your goal is to change out 31,000 residential meters, but you said it was only one single model of Badger AMR meters that needed to be replaced. Are we changing all residential meters or not?
No, not all residential meters.
All right.
But a majority of.
But the majority, 31,000 out of 40,000. I mean, yeah, 31,000 out of 40,000, something like that?
I think it's like 39,000 residential customers, so.
39.
31 out of 39.
Oh, okay. 31,000 out of 39,000 customers. All right. For me, that's the number one big revelation here is I didn't realize that you're going to change everybody's meter because everybody's meter's defective. And so it sounds to me like we should all be expecting a back billing if we haven't received one yet. And I guess I wasn't sure. It looks to me like, because I see your resolution and your new process, that the new process is very clear, that they're going to be informed within 2 weeks that their meter was exchanged. But I see now that no one's being informed prior to their meters being changed out, and then they might receive a letter. This is under your new process within 2.5 months of the meter exchange that they're under review for potential back billing. So if your process before this resolution was any more extended, this seems still extended to me, but yeah, if it was any more extended than this, I can see why there's a huge uproar about this, because first of all, yeah, I didn't realize that all meters are defective, or that many out of what we have. And
I'd be careful in saying that all meters are defective.
I'm sorry,
right?
31 out of 39,000.
And it's one particular model,
yeah,
right, of meter. Unfortunately, it was the model that was recommended to us and that we purchased when we undertook the replacement of the Metron Fournier meters. And so a very large number of our inventory, when we changed it out, was this particular model.
yes.
Subsequent to that, we started purchasing another model, and we've had no issues with that model, you know, and with deployments being more than 5 years. So the difference in performance between the one that we've determined to be defective versus the other model is night and day.
Right. Okay, great. But it's just that. It's that I don't think we all realized that so many of the meters were going to be replaced. Maybe I wasn't paying attention close enough, but that's one issue. The other issue is that I didn't realize until really having to study this bill and the statute that after you replace the meter and you take it back and you test it and you find it to be defective, that it's that you're allowed to back bill us, right? And the law allows back billing, but I didn't realize that it was based on, and it is in the law, subsequent billing. Because if you hear all the complaints, they're always phrased something like, I've been paying less than $100 every month for water and sewer for 5 years. And then all of a sudden, these bills go up. And I can see now from all of this together why that's happening, because if we're saying we get to use the new meters to bill 4 months back, it's never going to, it looks like it's always up. Is that right?
I'm sorry, it looks like it's always
It's
what?
always, the new meters are always showing an increase.
Well,
Or
that's
maybe always is not the
it's
right
not-
word, but there's
It's showing the actual consumption based on a properly functioning meter.
Right.
What was
But you're
showing previously?
replacing all the meters, whether you've determined, well,
And
I know that you're subsequently determining them to be defective, but the issue is that you're replacing them when I'm still getting billed $100 a month, right? Without it being clear to me right away that there was something wrong with my billing, because my billing is showing water usage almost. And so that's, I think, where the confusion, I'm just saying I can see where the public is alarmed, because it's a very after the fact type of process that we have in place. You're being told after the fact that your meter was replaced, you're being told after the fact that your meter was defective, and then you're being told after the fact that because of that defectiveness, your actual, what you thought was your consumption of $100 for the last 5 years was actually
higher,
much more than that.
Right,
yes.
right, and that's the goal. Is we recognize that in most of these cases, people were getting more water than they were paying for because the meter was failing, right? And that's a problem. That's a universal problem of all utilities. They're to get in a working meter that accurately measures consumption, right? So in many cases, especially the ones I've seen, the first thing that happens when a new meter goes in is the ratepayer now sees, oh wow, this is my actual consumption. It isn't $100 a month, it's $150. What's going on? Well, then we show them, look, you're running 24 hours. There's a leak, and in many of the cases that I've seen, not all, but in many of the cases I've seen it indeed, once there was, my nephew just said, once he fixed this leak, he just had a problem. Once he fixed his leak, his $200 bill went down to $100. So, that's having a failed meter works in both ways. It masks leaks that are actually occurring at someone's house because it's under registering, and that's not good for anybody. We want everyone to at least pay for their usage, and often new meters will reveal that, hey, your $100 bill should have been $125 once we put in a working meter, because over time your meter became less accurate. It's a constant tension. But right now, we're only experiencing a couple hundred meters that are failing now, not the thousands that were failing before, and that's
why do you say that? When it's my understanding, we don't know how many meters are failing. We're assuming all of this brand of this model are failing.
No, they only issued, it says here in the record, they issued 9,700 back bills. So remember,
Yes.
Over all these years. Remember, we send out 43,000 bills a month times 12 months. That's 500,000 bills times 6 years. That's 3 million bills. So the
but
fact
it's only once when they're going to get the back billing.
Correct.
Not
and
for 12,
correct.
not during 12.
Right. But if you're comparing how many back bills are issued out of the total universe, as their testimony shows, it's only 1% of our total revenue that we're trying to get to recover. It's not 99%. It's not 90%. It's a small percentage.
It's 9,700
over
customers out of your 32,000
and how much was the money
that you've already changed out, and you're expecting I don't know how many customers for the next 6,000 meters that you're going to change.
Right, but it was $4 million over a 3-year period, Senator. In that period, we billed $250 million. So it's only 1%.
No, I understand.
Okay, so that's to just keep it together. We're just trying to better get that 1% billed as accurately.
It's not 1% of your customers, though.
No,
it's 1% of the
right,
amount.
and it's a small. And right now, as they've testified,
right. So it's a much larger percentage, maybe.
No, it's only 200. It's only the testimony was 200 customers. Miguel, correct me if I'm wrong. You're averaging now 200.
For estimated billings.
For 200, not
but
thousands.
Not for back billing. So keep in mind that.
Then maybe clarify that, please. Yeah.
So the prior to going into the AMR, if we couldn't get a reading, we would estimate, right? And so those estimated billings were about 2,800 customers per month. After the AMR went into place, we were able to get readings. So the amount of estimated billings was reduced to 280 per month, or thereabouts, right? But the difference we're talking about, I want to make sure there's a distinction between the estimated billing and the back billing.
Oh, yes.
So on the back billing, and I'm going to clarify some of the numbers that we've talked about. We've one particular model that we know is experiencing problems and progressively failing. So it doesn't work great and then all of a sudden fail. You'll see a slight decline, and then at some point you won't get any readings on the low flow or the lower end of your usage, right? So it's a progressive failure. And the ones that are, when we realized that this model was failing, in some of the changeouts, we were also trying to make sure that we got them replaced under warranty, which is within the five-year period. So we were prioritizing trying to get replacements for meters that were going to approach their 5-year warranty, because we knew eventually they would fail based on the data that we were pulling in. So not every meter that we exchanged gets back billed. So we may change out the meter because we know it's defective, or we feel strongly that it's defective, but we don't back bill for every account where we've done a meter exchange. I think only of the ones that we've exchanged, only 60% have been back billed. So take that 31,000 that we were talking about, and then if we change out
60%?
all of that, then so our average has been about 60% of the ones that we change out
Okay.
get back billed.
All right, that's not written here. Okay, so 60%. That's still quite a bit.
Yes,
That's- yeah.
recognize that.
Yes,
When we're
all right.
working our best to try and resolve that with the manufacturer.
All right, well, now I understand a lot more, because I really believe, yeah, you were trying to explain that they were isolated incidences, but it's not. It's a system failure pretty much across the board for 60% of the meters so far. Yeah. Okay, what about, there's, it may seem like a silly question, but the new meters that you're using to base the new bills on, you said you test them before you put them in, and you're very sure of their accuracy. But they're, of course, reading water usage. So it's just no one has an issue with the amount of water usage that is being reflected there. Just that it's different from what it showed they were using in the prior 4 months.
If I understand the question correctly,
I mean, I guess it's like, for me, you're going to tell me, and it's a leap. We have to believe that our meter, which we never knew was not working properly, even though it was counting, usage. And now we have a new meter. And this one, we should totally trust that it's accurate. Yeah.
When we do the testing, pre-deployment testing, we take the batch of meters that come in. We sample a percentage of those meters, and we test them, and they all come out. They test.
Right.
They pass all 3 levels based on the AWWA standards, and so our confidence level in the meters that we are deploying are functioning appropriately is high. And that's, based on, number one, those test results, and number two, the performance of those meters in the field that have been deployed for years, which our program also calls for those to be randomly pulled out of service, tested, and they have passed. So that particular model that we're talking about, we've are having the issues with, is not as robust as the other model that we have put into service, tested before we put it into service, and then tested after it's been in service for years and it's come back and the performance meets the standards. So our confidence is high that those meters are registering correctly and the basis for the back billing is appropriate.
All right. When people, Mr. Leon Guerrero left, but I've also heard the same amount. And so I know these are just very generalizations, but I've heard the same number where people would say, oh, my bill increased by $1,000. But I'm assuming they mean for over a 4 period, they got an extra $1,000 tacked onto their bill. But when they calculate your average $74 back billing per month, the average monthly back billing of $74, times 4 months, it's only $296. So how are they ending up with $1,000 extras? I know his is different, it's a sewer issue, but on the water bills. Have you heard that same complaint? I've heard this $1,000 number.
Yeah. I think in those cases, it may be what was described earlier, where maybe the customer had a leak that they wasn't really registering on. If the meter wasn't registering any consumption, they would have billed for 0 gallons, and then once the good meter goes in and they had a leak, it would be based on those numbers.
Yeah.
So in that case, it might be as high as $1,000, but the majority of customers would be the average, the $74.
That's very hard to take, right? That we're going to know now I have a leak and my bill is up and, over $200, yet I'm going to be billed for 4 months past when there was no way I could have known about that leak. That's very hard for the customers and no way for them to budget either, right? For the past.
Right, and so that's why we extended the repayment period, and we could look at re-extending that again, and we didn't need to do it with legislation, we just chose to do it. But also remember the other side of the equation. Until we caught it, that customer was actually using a lot more water, losing it through leakage, using a lot more water than they were noticing because their bill was under reading, right? So there's always two sides of this coin. So for months, for X amount of time, they were using significantly more water because of a leak. Once we could prove to them that with a working meter that they have a leak, then most of the I've been going through this stuff for a long time. When you walk them through it and they fix the leak, guess what? Their bill goes down to something reasonable. And management does have some flexibility with those issues. But there's always the reason back billing emerges in this way is the recognition that you may have had a leak for many, many years that you weren't aware of because the meter was under registering, and so other ratepayers were paying the power bill for that, the chlorination bill for that, those things. And again, no one is trying to do it on purpose. We're just trying to find the fairest way to do a billing when we advance the service first. All right, we don't make you prepay.
I understand why you're doing it, and I don't have an issue with what you're doing. It's just I do very much agree with the customers that it is very hard to really just accept that there was something wrong with my meter when I check it every month, even me, because I want to make sure they're, charging me for usage and that. But it's also a little bit difficult. Is there any other way you can do something different besides? I see in your new process in the resolution it says you can let them know 2.5 months later that your meter was tested and the account is under review for potential back billing. Can you test it in the homes while they're there, so I can see right away with my own eyes that it's not working? Because that's, I think, you might not believe me, but for me, that's very hard to take, that somebody took it away from my house and now they're telling me it doesn't work.
So the test bench facility is based on
Big machine.
testing against a primary standard, and there's a lot of equipment involved. It's in order to test it most accurately, you need this type of facility. So there isn't a way. We have a portable unit which is designed primarily for larger meters that we don't have in inventory. So if, for example, there's something wrong with a large diameter hotel meter, we may not have a replacement. So in order to test it, we have a device that we can take out and test it in the field because we have no replacement. Our preference would be to pull it, take it to the test bench facility where we get the most accurate testing and then provide the results. I understand with our credibility issues that the consumer thinks there was nothing wrong with my meter, there's something funny going on here, which is not the case. The reason why we take it to the test bench facility is because that's where we get the most accurate results. We do advise the customer that they are welcome to come witness the testing. We have no problems doing that. And some have come and they've seen, and after they've witnessed a test, they understood and they were satisfied. And I in fact a couple weeks ago got a letter commending the guys at the test bench facility because they handled the customer's request so professionally. So we're open to doing that, and that is included in the letter that we send.
And the test bench is in the court order. It's standard industry practice for good water utilities to have a testing facility, and it was put in the court order. We used ratepayer money to get the testing facility, and we processed those tests accordingly. So we're following best practices in the industry and following our court order to ensure we have some mechanism.
Well, we definitely want it tested. I'm not
Oh,
arguing
we
the
all do.
testing.
Yeah,
So Miguel, you're saying that the letter that the customer receives indicating the water meter has been replaced, in that letter you tell them they are welcome to come and review the testing?
That's correct. And a copy of all the letters was included in your packet.
thank
So it
you.
would be the first letter under attachment 4.
All right. And what about, so that practice, was that in place all this while, or is that new from this new
So
resolution?
the time standards went into effect after the resolution in February.
Okay. So that notice that they could see the testing of their meter was not in effect yet?
Correct.
All right, great. So as to your new time standards, it seems to me that 2.5 months, if you could shorten that, I would recommend that. It's a 2.5 months where GWA will send the customer a letter indicating the meter was tested and the accounts under review for back billing. In other words, your meter was defective, right? And that's 2.5 months later. But I'm going to leave that up to you because I can't control that. But I like your recommendation also about the limit to be put on.
The front end.
But it's 180 days. I mean, I agree with the limit. Is there any way we can do it shorter than this? Because this is, right now the law says it's like 70 days, they have to read your meter and then, give you a bill. But this is a really quite a long time, 180 days.
Yeah, so the logistics involved in identifying the meter, prepping the field activity and the packets to send out to the field crews, have them go out and exchange the meter, send that meter over to the TenchBest facility, have them test it, have that information put into the customer information system. It's quite a lengthy process, and that's why it's I think especially when right now where we're trying to change out 31,000 meters. If we were on a regular meter maintenance program where we were only testing 100 meters a month, no problem, we could shorten that down, but under the current circumstances, it would be difficult.
All right. All right, that's all my questions for now. I guess, so going forward, we can expect 6,000 more meters to be replaced. And are the customers going to know that you're there at their house removing their meters, or they might not know if they weren't home?
So there is a letter that goes out 15 to 20 days prior to the meter being exchanged. That wasn't part of the resolution. It came in after.
Okay, that's great. I would like to know that. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Terlahi. Commissioner Duenas, I understand you're here to provide testimony as well.
Madam Chairman, Sabina Perez, and Senator Sabina Perez, and members of the committee, my name is Joey Duenas, for the record. The meters are probably one of the most crucial parts of any utility. And I can tell you, in speaking with countless other commissioners across the country, general managers of both electric and water utilities, it's an area that continues to be a challenge for everybody in the utility. Let me give you an example of the change out that we did with GPA when we went to the smart meters from the analog meters. A lot of the analog meters were under recording, but a group of them were over recording. So the response I got from the ratepayers was, a lot of them said, wow, my bill actually went up. But there were a group that actually called me and said, my bill went down. And that's because those analog meters were failing too, but they weren't failing dramatically. The smart meters are a lot better. They're a lot more accurate. We don't have the same, if you notice, the discussion today has mostly been about water meters. It hasn't been that much about smart meters. But the smart meters are much better, and it helps us to, again, give fairness to all ratepayers. When you get to the water meters, and especially when it gets to leakage, I'm going to tell you that I live in an area of Jotnya, and Senator Terlahi, you live in Jotnya too. I don't know what your water pressure is like on your side, but I have tremendous water pressure on my side. And that's because I believe if you have the same type of water pressure I have, where you can turn on your faucet, and with your gun, it's almost like a water blaster coming out of your hose, that's because we exist on a transmission line that goes through Jotnya, that brings water down to the Cross Island Road and brings water down to the southern end of the island. That's a huge transmission line. So I had a water leak in my house. And it was in an area of my house that I couldn't see. And I got a bill for $2,700. And that water was leaking at a rate that just like nobody's business. Because if you took a pail and put it under your faucet, for example, and opened the faucet a little bit, that would be the pressure coming out. You would watch the pail get full. It would get full slowly and keep getting full. If you open the faucet full, the pail would fill up much faster. So therefore, I've learned a lesson, a $2,700 lesson, that in Jotnya, you better watch it, because if you have a leak, that pail is going to fill up so much faster than if you're in an area, Barragata Heights. How about that area? We have a lot of complaints and pressure up there. That leak is not going to be that big a deal, but in Jotnya it can be a huge deal. So that's just one aspect I'd like to share with you, that when it comes to the water meters, and Miguel and Chris, our Assistant General Manager for Administration, are doing a great job, because they're going through all the different things, but there are little anecdotes that's why I wanted to come up and share with you, so that you would understand that sometimes where you are in the system. Now, we are working to put even pressure into the entire system. Miguel's working on what they call pressure zones. It would be nice if Guam were a nice flat area, like some of the Midwest areas, where you have the water tank up high and the ground is fairly level, because water pressure is fairly easy. But we have so many pump stations and so many hills and valleys that moving the water around, that's when the pressure comes into play. Okay? And it works the way reverse back with the sewer. You have all the sewer that's collected and then has to be pumped up in a force main. So there are a lot of different challenges that we have that are unique to our topography on our island. And that's why some areas, people are going to have a big leak, like I did. A leak that if the water pressure were only like about 20 pounds per square inch or 15 pounds per square inch, it would not have been that big a bill. But because it was closer to 60 pounds per square inch, which is what I've had Barrett Plumbing check on it's going to be a huge leak. The only other thing I would like to add is there was a gentleman who spoke earlier about having a problem when you have a power situation and it causes your compressor to break on your air conditioner or some board. There was a bad electrical storm back several years ago, and some of my components went out. If you look on GPA's website, there is an information about how you can claim in case there is a problem. Now, you have to be very careful, because you have to make note of the exact time and date when that event happened. So if you're not home or you're gone off island, that would be a real problem. But if you make note of the time and date, if it's caused by an electrical storm, you can note that down and they will check the weather patterns. If it's caused because there was a problem with the power system that maybe went to a brownout where the power doesn't just go out, but you lose one leg of the power system and the lights go real dim, then if you make those notations and you can fill out the form, you can get reimbursed. Because what you need to do is then they go back, and if the GPA will check its records and say, okay, this particular circuit had an incident at that particular time on that date, then you have an argument and you can fill out a form. So I just want to make sure that, and maybe one of the things I will acknowledge is we have to do a better job again of informing our customers that these things are available. So I know John is going to try hard to do a better job of informing people now that he heard that complaint. So those are the kind of things that I wanted, anecdotal issues that I wanted to bring to your attention, okay?
Sorry, thank you, Mr. Duenas, Commissioner Duenas. So, let me just give it to Kevin. Senator Marsh Taitano.
Half a day. As others have mentioned, Sejuis Masi for coming here. I think What we've gone through thus far has been really important. It's provided a lot of information, it's explained a lot of things. There's been recognition of the need to carry out certain processes better, to better inform people. Those have all been important things to be hearing. I have had somebody ask me, and so if you could repeat for all of our records who, or I should say which company we were buying meters from, and whether we're now feeling satisfied with our current provider or vendor of meters?
So the current meter vendor, Badger Meters, we are comfortable with certain models that they provide. We are very uncomfortable with one specific model that they have provided to us, which they no longer manufacture. So I would say overall, the performance of the meters that we have had no issues with has been satisfactory.
And can you remind me, because I think you mentioned it before, for these other models from Badger, were you saying that we've had several years of experience with them, so that it's kind of tested out that there is some evidence?
Yes, so we've had these meters in service since, you know when?
Yeah, so the meters some of them went into service in 2014, and just this past year we pulled 200 of them from various lengths of time as far back as 2014, 2015, 2016. We also look for meters with high levels of consumption that have gone through them, and the failure rates was very low on all those 200 tested.
Would you say that the failure rate fits within an expected industry standard?
For the current meters that we're purchasing, yes. For the meters that we've had the issue with, they do not fall within what's expected.
Now, you did mention, and this is good for us to hear, that you are getting better at, or you are holding the sellers and the manufacturers accountable. Does any of that include holding them accountable for the labor of switching out 40,000 or 31,000 meters?
I would hesitate to discuss the details of what could be potential litigation. So I guess I wouldn't provide a firm response on that, but we're looking in preparation for what could be potential litigation. We're looking at everything.
Okay, so I'm not quite sure how to word this next part of it, but perhaps it would have the same sort of response. I too find it problematic to find out about the leakage, that if there is leakage going on, I understand holding people accountable for a certain period of time where they could have been able to address it, but beyond 1 month, for me, at least me personally, it becomes a bit harder to justify, even if we use terms that the water was used. There just is taken away that ability to make informed decisions, to take action, and so forth. So my next question is there potential in the way that these sorts of things that are handled for claiming from the manufacturer, not only the laborer potentially, but issues like some of this leakage that were not detected for months or perhaps even longer?
Potential from the customer standpoint or potential from the utility standpoint?
Well, if the utilities is losing out on the labor and they're only able to recuperate the costs of a certain amount of leakage, I don't know if that's an industry standard practice to also seek for some other damages, as in potential loss of maybe copious or large amounts of water due to not being able to detect leakages for months, if not longer.
I'm not sure if I can answer that question, Senator. I mean, I guess it's something that we can look at, but I don't know the answer to that question.
Some of the revenue is recovered through back billing, right? We find your meter has failed, we put in a working meter, the meter now gets put in there, and we back bill you up to not to exceed 4 months. What often occurs is there has been a leak going on for a long time, and the consumer's actually been well underbilled for that because it's only showing a $60 bill, but there's a leak. And then you put in the new meter, and this happens quite often, and it shows, oops, Maria, your $60 bill really should have been $150 because you have a leak in the toilet, right? And that's where some of the controversy emerges. But we also have to recognize that for a long period of time, till we get that right working meter in there, a significant amount of water was being provided to that ratepayer who wasn't fixing the leak, and we need to try to get a meter that, one, will identify quickly, hey, there's a leak, and improve our processes of notifying that we see a leak, take a look at it, and the fact that we do recover some of it from the back billing. So, but I think I appreciate that management's being a little cautious as we're exploring all opportunities for recovery, but the fact that almost every state in the union allows for back billing recognizes that even with all those machinations between meter suppliers and utilities, there needs to be some mechanism, as reasonable as you can get it, to estimate the amount of usage during the time that the meter was failing till the time a new meter was put in, and you use that average for now. That's the average you use, and we've seen a number of times where once you put in a working meter, oh wow, you got a leak. Your $60 bill should have been $150. We can't go back more than 4 months. We're only going to hit you, but you're now paying $150 instead of $60, which is actually fair to the other ratepayers, because that water was actually flowing through the meter to that person's house, taking on costs, electricity, chlorination, labor, for more water that was being used by that consumer, even though the meter failed to record all that water. And then you put in a meter that does record it. The good news is then both GWA and the ratepayer go, I got a leak in that toilet. They go fix the leak, and inevitably that higher usage goes down. And I'm aware that management has some flexibility to deal with that, but recognizes if your toilet's been leaking for 8 or 9 months, you also are creating an unfair situation for your neighbors. If you're allowed to just completely get it, just not under this bill, you would never be allowed to be billed for it. You could bust your meter now if this bill were law, and there's no way to back bill you. And I don't think that was the intention. I think the intention is everything you're hearing today is to get it better. But the words in the bill right now just completely remove a tool that almost every utility in the nation uses for the reasons of fairness to all the other ratepayers that should, to the greatest degree possible, only pay for their consumption and not pay for their neighbor's consumption, and vice versa.
Madam Chairman, if I could, I'm sorry.
If I could just respond to that really quickly. So in the way that I'm sorting this out, and I will still read through and continue to sort this out for a while longer, but it seems to me, especially when we get to the issue of leakage and not having the information to be able to rectify. So I really do struggle with past the month. And even though, like I said, one can use the term that it's being utilized, I see it as a shortfall on either the manufacturer or a shortfall on the part of the government.
But shouldn't the ratepayer make an effort to repair their leak?
Well, exactly. They have to be given the information in a timely manner, not necessarily.
Well, sometimes you can just hear it leaking.
4 months
sometimes you see a faucet running.
Later.
You know.
Yeah. So for me right now, that's where I struggle with not being able to know for a month, get it rectified within a month, and then to find out perhaps a year later that it's been leaking all year and I'm going to be held accountable because I wasn't given the information to act upon for a year. And now not all of it is
But only
us.
up to 4 months.
Exactly, or for the 4 months. So not all of it is our utilities. In this case, it is the manufacturer, but I still do find it problematic beyond the month in the case of a leak, especially knowing that sometimes those leaks can be quite large. Like if it's a small leak, that's one thing, sure. But there can be instances where this leakage could be a really large issue. So I do struggle with that. So Mr. Duenas, if you want to provide some more information, and then I have another question or two.
No, Senator, please proceed. I was going to add one more comment on a previous comment that was made, but I can wait until you're done, Senator. I'm sorry. I thought you were done.
So I just wanted to clarify, in this newer system that we have, which it's very good to hear that we can be notified about the 24-hour usage and that there may be a leak so that in a timely fashion we can handle it. I know I certainly would want to. With that time of notification and being told that a 24-hour usage is being detected, does one have to wait till the billing cycle to receive that, or are we being notified prior to that?
So I've asked customer service to see if we can handle this with a phone call as soon as the reads come back in and they're detected. I think Chris, you might want to address that.
Yeah, just to add to that. So it only occurs after the read happens. So it's basically once a month. We'll pick up the read, and anything on the read within the last week that shows 24 hours of continuous use will flag with the leak notice. So it's a little different. If we were using AMI technology, we would be able to get that information more real time, but because it's the radio technology, we're driving around picking up the reads only once a month.
But we're trying to make a better effort at when we do get the reads, especially if it's a high leak, we could tell based on the hourly information that a phone call be made, if at all possible, in order to provide notice instead of you waiting until you get the bill to see it on the bill.
I appreciate that. I think that is really important. That is some of the issue that we had with our public pools, is not being able to be notified. And I understand, again, some of this is our technology, some of this is other issues, but especially with the swimming pool, it made a huge difference given the amount of water that they utilize at a time. But even for us residential ratepayers, the earlier the notification, the better. I've dealt with some pretty large leaks on my property, and so that's immediately where I go to when I hear that I might be billed for 4 months of what might be a very large leak. And the last question that I have, and forgive me if I missed it somewhere along the line, but just to reassure us all. So when we're talking about the back billing that's been in place, is this, according to your assessments and review of other standard practices, does this fall in line with the best practices or the standard practices out there? Should back billing continue, let's say, or some other direction we go forward with? Are there recommendations to what is happening beyond what we've discussed? But first of all, do you feel it fits in with standard practices for these other states? And then any further recommendations beyond those that we've discussed already?
So with regard to whether it's standard practice within other states and jurisdictions, it is absolutely standard practice within other states and jurisdictions.
Well, the way we go about it, the
So
types of
the method,
methods that we use.
Yeah, the method by which the numbers are calculated for back billing is based on what the PUC has put forth. And in my recent discussions with PUC's rate consultant, and in their review of our back billing procedure, they found no issues with how we were conducting it, and they had, to my understanding, no recommendations on changes to that procedure or calculation. So I think it's fair to say that from our assessment, it's accepted as standard industry practice.
And then no other recommendations at this time, but I also do want to know who the rate consultant is. I'm assuming it's a corporation of some sort.
It's the Public Utilities Commission rate consultant, Georgetown Consulting Group. They were tasked with investigating our back billing process and procedures, and we provided them with information. They had a conference with them to discuss our process, and we gave them additional information, answered their questions. And my opinion just then was based on my conversation with them just last week.
Okay, so I was going to ask how recent that was, but you already beat me to that. So last week. Sejus Masi for the additional information. Again, I think all the information that's been brought up has been extremely important to hear. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Senator Marsh Taitano. Commissioner Duenas, do you have?
Yeah, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. Just one other comment. There was a comment made earlier by one of the other speakers about DZSP and a Navy line, and it reminded me that there's a real problem when you have land that is returned by the military, because the land that's returned by the military has no easements or anything on it. So it's a real problem for GWA and GPA when they get these properties back. There's no design. They have some housing areas, for example, that have been returned, and where the roads are, the water pipes aren't there. The water pipes are in behind the houses. They go every which way. And so therefore, there are some areas where the military still has control of some pipes and sewer and water. So that is a real problem whenever land is returned. I don't know how else to tell you, but maybe somebody needs to look at when land is returned by the military to individual owners, and there's no easements and there's no schematics or design or drawings. So, because, you know, understand when the military has a piece of property and they put in housing or whatever development, they make it easiest for them. So there's no requirement to follow this or follow that. And so there is a real problem in some of these areas that are returned. And that could lead to some of the comments that were done earlier, where they said something about that. I'll give you a very clear example of this. Down at Peagle several years ago, there was a big water break. It's maybe just about a year ago. There was a big water break right into the main entrance into the cemetery. And everybody called GWA, and it was a Navy line. And then even further back in several years, there was a big water leak on Route 16 by the main post office facility that closed that road down. And that was not a GWA line. That was a military line again. So there are all these crisscrosses over the lines. And sometimes when we answer and we say that actually is a different kind of a problem, we have to work with them. And we can't just touch things because it affects other parts of their system. Okay, so I don't know who to tell that to, but I'm just offering it to you if you would like to look at that. That was brought up earlier today, so.
Thank you.
But if I may, Madam Chair, for Senator Taitano, to make it clear on the record, both GPA and GWA and Chairman Duenas and myself have testified clearly that this practice is industry standard, that back billing is allowed because services are provided before you bill them. It is the overwhelming industry practice. And I want to make sure that Senator Marsh has departed, but her question about the back billing, not having back billing would be the exception, not the rule. The industry practice, in an attempt to balance the interests of those that got a bad bill because of a bad meter with those that would otherwise have to pick up the bill for that customer who otherwise still got service. And it is the industry practice in the United States amongst the overwhelming majority of states and territories and water systems to allow some form of back billing. And unfortunately, this bill as written would take away that tool and eliminate what's a pretty standard practice for all utilities in the United States in an attempt to be fair to all ratepayers, not just to ones that have lost, whose service was affected by a meter that was most of the time under reading, but also for the other ratepayers that they are not unfairly assessed the cost of service that was otherwise provided just because a meter failed. Back billing is the industry standard.
I have a question, Madam Chair, if I may. Just to follow up to that.
Senator Rizzo.
Thank you. So is it the industry standard also to back bill for months prior to when the meter shows that it's defective?
Depending on the community, some are 4 months, some are 2 months, some can back bill for 10 years. Our current law is limited to 4 months on the back end, and we are having a healthy debate on whether there should be something on the front end.
So they're allowed to back bill for months when, for all intents and purposes, the meter was working. It showed that it wasn't working in month A, let's say, like I said, say the meter shows it's not working in September, that it may not be working.
I think, I'll let management answer it.
It allows the information that we have based on different jurisdictions. Some allow you to back bill from that time only 2 months prior, and some are indefinite. Some jurisdictions you can back bill indefinitely.
From the time you discovered that it failed, which is a problem.
But also just for the period that it was suspected it was out, whenever it went out
That's
September.
the question I'm trying to determine. Is it for
and
the...
if it's only 1 month later, you fix it, so you only back bill for that 1 month, not for 4 months.
It's not an automatic fail.
Up to a maximum of 4 months.
That's the question I was trying to get answered. Because what I've seen happen before, and in my case in particular, I was back billed for months when there was nothing wrong with the meter. In other words, the meter went out in October, it was replaced in October, I was back billed for the months prior to October, not for the time from when it went out to the time it was replaced.
So as I mentioned previously, it's the determinant used in evaluating whether a back bill is to be issued for any of the 4 months prior is a comparison of the consumption that was registered or billed for those months versus the average that was applied for the 2 months subsequent to the meter change out using a proper meter.
Which in Senator Rizzo's scenario is problematic because usage definitely increased in the 2 months subsequent because his family situation changed. And, right? Just one example.
For those instances where there are documented reasons why there would have been an increase in the subsequent 2 months, adjustments can be made, and we've been open to doing that, and we've made adjustments.
All right, so just to clarify, when you say that other states allow back billing, do they allow back billing for defective meters?
Yes.
And when the PUC reviewed, you said on page 9 of your testimony, the PUC reviewed and had findings with the Georgetown Consulting Group. Can we get copies of that report?
Sorry, in the testimony,
Page 9.
Page 9, we have not received the report, but we have been told that there are no issues with the findings of that report. So we have not received a copy.
All right.
So otherwise, I would provide you with one, but we can ask the PUC.
Did GW pay for that consultant's review?
Ultimately, I think we do pay for it.
Through PUC?
Yeah.
All right. And if you get a report, I'd like to see it. And,
Yes.
and then you say that you're also in compliance with PUC's policies. And could you just also make sure we have PUC's policies if there are anything in writing that are not included in the law
Sure.
or your rules. Thanks. And then I guess with the scenarios we've been talking about, if a meter is declining where it's not showing all the water that's being used, shouldn't the bills be going down, and wouldn't that, no?
And they often do, but we don't get calls from people that, hey, my bill just went from 70 to 20. Especially given our track record way
Because
back.
you make it sound like almost always there's a water leakage, then the usage was being hidden, but really I think isn't it logical that if the meters are not showing usage, then our billing should have been declining also while the meters were declining?
Yes, that's correct.
Possible?
Yeah.
All right. Okay, then just finally, there's a fiscal note attached to this bill that says it would have an impact of 3.2 million on GWA, which is 6% of total water revenues for FY 2020 only. That's what they're talking about. In your letter, you say 3.136 or 2.6% of total revenues on page 8, I think. On page 6, there's another number that says it's 4.193 million for the several years, 2017 to 2019, or 1.2% of total billed revenue, not total revenue. And I'm just pointing this out, and I'm not a math person, so you can explain it. But because in former Senator Sanchez's testimony, he says this bill is a type of bill that, forced the decline of GWA years ago. I just don't agree with that. First of all, the legislature was able to limit back billing to 4 months, and that's not causing the decline of GWA.
That was after the removal of the legislature from rate setting.
But that's by law that it's 4 months.
Because of the default that occurred.
And I'm just saying, if the legislature is able to limit it to 4 months, then it seems reasonable to me that maybe not advisable by the CCU.
No,
but I'm saying that there was a very clear policy, that
and
behind
we've implemented that 4-month policy.
Right.
We
That's
are
all I'm
suggesting a
asking
front end change.
If the impact is less than one report showing 6% of total revenue, one report says 2.6% of total revenue, and one report says 1.2% of total billed revenue. I mean, does that really, having an impact on 1.2% of total billed revenue really going to cause the agency to, go under?
Well, the rates would have to be raised to raise that revenue. But right now, it doesn't have to be raised because we're able to get that revenue from people that actually use some water, for which we're estimating that the best we can, because the meter stopped turning, how much water was used during that period the meter stopped turning, and we estimate that just like every other jurisdiction.
I'm just saying, but it says for over 3 years, so 2017, 18, 19, 3 years, you've it's only impact by 1.2% of your total billed revenue. Yeah.
So Chris can speak to the difference in the numbers first off, and then I'll answer the second part of your question.
Okay, so the 1.2% is the historical amount of billed revenue over the period of the meter replacements, 2009 to current. In the testimony, the 2.6% is the estimated bills as well as the back bills, so they're two separate things. That's why it's higher than the 1.2. So the back bill would remain at 1.2%.
And in terms of the impact, in my discussions with PUC's rate consultant on the rate case, which is currently before the PUC last week, the issue of back billing came up, and even for the rate consultant, it is the ability to recover the costs is a necessary tool in order to avoid unnecessary rate increases. So it's critical to them, and it would be something that they would be looking at and are looking at as part of the rate case.
All right, so a 1% loss in your total billed revenue over those historically, or we'll say for FY 2020, if we use the same, is going to result in rate increases, is what you're saying.
And that's why 50 states
and
don't allow it.
And then when you say that this might also affect the bond indenture, I'm just wondering if you have that in writing, like a legal opinion, have you asked them to look at this? And if you do have that, could we also get a copy of that?
We'll provide that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Chalahi. So just doing a quick calculation. So you were mentioning Miguel Bradalio about it's about 4.19 million for 2017-2019 to replace the. I'm sorry, that's back billing alone, right? Okay.
Yes.
So if we were to divide that out evenly amongst the number of residential households, so there's 42,000. Is that correct?
42,000 total customers, but residential is less than that. I believe it's around 39,000.
39.
Okay, 39,000. So that is actually roughly about $100, a little over $100 per customer. Do you think that qualifies as, that PUC has to step in and do a rate case on that? Because that's a significant amount of money for the residential ratepayers.
I'm not certain as to the threshold, but anything that has the potential to increase rates, they would step in and require us to justify it, or it would be evaluated by their rate consultant, to my understanding.
So is this something that GWA could potentially ask for a rate case on this one, or the public?
If we were not able to cost recover, then it would result in us asking for additional rates to cover what we're losing in revenue from not being able to collect for water that was used.
So for the older models, these are, so from Metreon Farnier, that was digital, is that correct? It's a digital meter?
It's an AMR meter.
Okay, so that's different from the previous ones, which were analog?
I think you're
The
confused.
the old census meters were not digital. They were simply, turned a wheel. So they
Okay.
were mechanical.
Okay, so the ones current, like from Metreon onward, they were digital.
They were still using
The mechanical side.
mechanical methods to measure the flow, but the transmission of the data was electronic, as opposed to being analog on a dial and then transcribed by hand and so on and so forth.
So the physical meter really hasn't changed much. They just supply better technology. The radio read part is allowing us just to drive by, ping the meter, get it on an iPad, load it up tonight, and bill. So it's improved that process.
Is there a double check on that to verify whether the digital's reading properly? I mean, is there a secondary measure, way to kind of verify that accuracy?
Double check. I mean,
Well,
when we
as
test,
far as the digital reading, I mean, is
when
there
we-
like a backup type of,
when
type
the
of
meters
device?
tested, it evaluates the meter completely, including what gets transmitted in the read. So I'm not sure if I understand what you mean by a double check. If someone goes out and physically compares or takes the digital reading that was radio transmitted versus what may appear on the meter itself, no, I don't believe there's a double check of that.
So when the meter is tested in the test bench facility, the equipment itself will measure the amount of water that passes through the meter, and it's done separate and apart from the encoder, which is what is the digital part that you're referring to. So yes, there is it is tested both two separate ways.
Okay. So has there been a change in the standards that are used to determine whether a meter fails throughout the years? Has the equipment changed?
Not since we've been operating the test bench facility. The equipment is the same, but the standards, if you're referring to the AWWA standards, those are subject to revision, but I don't believe that they have changed in the time that we've been running the meter test bench facility.
So the equipment has remained the same from what time, what period of time?
I can't recall when we installed.
When you
the
say
meter test-
equipment, Senator, which equipment, what are you referring
So
to?
the ones that you use to test whether a meter has failed, the
test
equipment
bench?
that's used Is that still the same?
Yeah, the test bench facility is the same. We have had the manufacturer of the test bench equipment come out and look at it and calibrate it. And so
How-
they've come out frequently. I think since I've been here, they've come out twice, and I've only been here three and a half years.
So they come out to calibrate or test it to see if it falls within calibration specs?
And if there's an upgrade to anything that, they come out and provide it and then train our personnel.
Has it ever failed, the records show?
No.
Okay. And as far as when you said the standards have changed, what do you mean by standards?
The AWWA standards is what I thought you were referring to for meter testing, right?
And when was that changed?
No, I said I don't think that they have changed since I've been here.
A minute ago, you were saying they did change.
Sorry, Senator, maybe I should clarify. I think the standards are subject to change, but I do not believe that they have changed since I've been here.
So since the 3 years that you've been general manager, the equipment's the same, the standards are the same. What about going back to 2014?
Sorry, I can't speak to that.
Is there any information on that?
Well, how long have we had the test bench, Miguel? Because we got it before, the test bench we got before Miguel joined us, correct? So we had the test bench was court ordered for exactly, I think, all the reasons you want accuracy, right?
So what year was that?
Was it in the first court order or the second one? No, I'm showing my age. For sure it was in the second one. For sure it was in the amended one, if it wasn't in the first one. But I want to say, I think the test bench was funded later, right? So it came in the second court order.
Second quarter of which
I think
year?
it was 2013 when the equipment was purchased, but we have to verify that.
Okay.
So it had to be the second court order amended the first one in 2011.
Okay.
So that's when the test bench was added in to improve accuracy.
I would appreciate if you could submit calibration records going back to those years.
Sounds good. Good.
Okay. The other thing is, so there's an attempt to possibly get, or at least claims from a manufacturer from one of the, claims from one of the manufacturers of the the meters. Is it within the CCU, or has it been determined that should we get money, would that money go towards mitigating some of the back billing?
That has not been determined or discussed as of yet.
I think
Let's get the recovery first.
Okay.
It's an easier conversation because then you actually have a number. But I think your logic is sound, that could we use that as rate relief? Maybe a future rate increase that is currently being planned. We have another 5-year plan. Maybe that recovery could be used to mitigate, reduce a future rate increase. That'd be a reasonable, at least to me, that'd be a reasonable way to apply it.
Would the priority be for rate relief for everybody, or the rate relief for the back billing?
Senator,
those old times.
we are still in the process of trying to determine a course of action. We have to weigh the different things that we can get and the cost involved. So I would tell you that would be premature at this time, because as was stated, we don't know what we're going to end up with. The difference now is that in the first meter change-out, we weren't as knowledgeable and we weren't as fast as going back on the meter supplier. This time we are. That's why a bunch of the meters we were able to get on warranty. It didn't cost the ratepayers. But we're trying to get more, and we really can't discuss that because we're trying to evaluate where we are in that
Understand. So regarding the quality assurance, moving on, it seems like GWA is working towards really tightening the response to meters that have failed. So as far as quality assurance, what is the known failure rate of the new meters? or how long is their lifespan, and what is the rate of failure? And should that be factored into a quality assurance program to make sure that these meters are caught on a timely basis?
So it's already factored into the current quality control program. The failure rate for the one specific model, which we know we have an issue with, is about 84%, which is extremely high.
So as far as the current model, what is their lifespan?
The current model, not the one that we've had issues with?
Yeah, just the ones that you're replacing, the ones that you are using to replace.
The useful life of those meters could be anywhere from 10 to 20 years.
Okay. And they come with a device that can measure delta significant changes in water consumption. So that way it provides more sensitivity to determine if potential leaks, to kind of hedge the back billing. That's what I'm getting at.
So that's what we do in the meter test facility. When we put the meters through the testing, it would measure that against the AWWA standards.
But when it's in use, there's still ways to determine if there's a sudden increase. I mean, would you basically provide
it's
that
difficult
service?
because there's if that would be easy to do if consumption was constant, but because the consumption varies, there isn't that type of sensitivity that a sudden change in what's expected. There is no expectation in terms of the consumption because minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, the consumption varies, right? So it's if I understand where you're going with the question, I don't think that any meter has that inherent capability.
Yeah, just I guess maybe like to make a recommendation as far as increasing the robustness, as far as providing the customer with some sort of idea about whether
in
they
terms
need
of
to
the customer's
take action.
usage, the CCMB, the meter itself doesn't have the sensitivity, but when the meter data is downloaded into the system and compared against the customer's historical usage, that may be where we can provide that type of protection or monitoring that you're talking about. But not within the meter device itself is my point.
All right, thank you. Is there anyone who would like to provide testimony? Yes.
Hafide, my name is Andrea Pelicani, and I'm just here to testify as a citizen. Coincidentally, paid my water bill today. This is not 2014, 2017, or anything around those times. I have no interest in the water authority's ability to replace meters or anything. I'm just trying to pay my bills. I went in a few months ago, was told they replaced out my meter. I got the notices in the mail, got a bill. I asked why my consumption is so high now. I got a report in the email, says, let us know if you have any questions. I said, yes, why is my water consumption so high? I followed up. I got no response from customer service. That's 2 emails. At their convenience, I wasn't pressing. I followed up, I gave it a week, followed up again later. So I go in, I'm like, you know what, like everybody else, I'm forced to pay this. I go in, I make a payment plan. I said, you know what, it's not too high. I can do it in 4 payments. I go in today, and I'm told, I'm sorry, we don't have a copy of your payment plan. If you don't pay this, you're going to be disconnected. So this is not not just a cost to recovery issue. This is a systemic issue, and I'm asking for somebody to please audit this billing process. I don't have a problem paying whatever I consume. I don't think most people have a problem paying for what they consume. I have a problem with paying these high rates and going in there and being told, I'm sorry, we lost your paperwork. Pay it all or we're going to cut you off. This is a systemic billing problem. It's not just a back billing problem. And I was just heading home and was being told I got charged $156 for my water and I had no choice. And though this back billing issue, according to previous testimony, has been a 24-year bill, I don't hear anybody screaming about protecting ratepayers' billing. I really don't. I didn't mean to come here. I was just so irate in my car that I'm out $156 that I don't have. I did my due diligence as a ratepayer. I went in, I made my payment plan. This is just not right. This is not how ratepayers and customers should be treated. I just spoke to Heidi back here. She's so kind. I said, look, I don't want help. I want to go through what every customer is going through. And I'm not alone. This is a problematic billing process that has been going on for longer than 10 years. And I thank Senator Rogel for introducing this bill. And maybe it will cause, some action. With all due respect, I know these gentlemen are very qualified for their jobs. And I know they're also ratepayers. But thousands of people have come to the table to say I have a problem with my bill. I don't understand my bill. Why am I getting paid? Why am I paying this now? What is it going to take? And so that's my issue, and I thank you for hearing me out. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Pellicani. Are there any others who would like to testify? Okay, so being that there are no other public that wants to testify, this meeting, the Committee on Environment, Revenue, and Taxation Procurement is now adjourned. The time is now 4:36 p.m.